Hi, everybody. Before I call tonight's meeting to order, I wanted to kick us off with happy birthday week to two of our directors because they're going to celebrate all week, Directors Finch and Directors Icestone. They expect cookies from Chase Ramey. There we go. And more importantly, happy Veterans Day to all of our veterans watching or in the room. Thank you for your service, especially to our directors, Eastham and Williams. Thank you. All right, with that, let's start tonight's meeting. I'll call it to order and welcome everyone to the November 11th, 2025 regular meeting of the Board of Directors. Thank you to those attending in person, joining us over Zoom, or staying engaged by watching our recording at a later time. The public is reminded that if they wish to speak during community comment, they will need to fill out a speaker form located in the back of the room on the table to my left and turn it in to our board secretary, Kim Coven, seated at the end of the table, also on my left. Comments will take place during the designated community comment portion of our agenda. And with that, I want to take a moment to introduce those seated at the table with me. To my right, we have Superintendent Degner, Directors Icestone, Eastham, and Williams. I'm President Malone. To my left, we have Vice President Abraham, Directors Finch, Lingo, and Board Secretary Coven. And that takes us right into our next portion of the agenda, which is our student representative updates. And we will start with Tate High, who has submitted a video for their update.
In October, we had a spirit week with dress up days, snow cones, root beer floats, and we finished the week with a fun flag football game.
The Raptor program brought a few raptors to biology class and talked about their program and the birds.
We've had many college and career field trips.
We had a lot of students enjoy the Capri College field trip. They got to do hair, nails, and a hunter hat.
Our cybersecurity class went to the Kirkwood Regional Center.
All freshmen went to the CFI for the Career Inspire event.
A couple of students went to our monthly volunteering opportunity at the free lunch program.
Students have been signing up for job shadow and internship opportunities and completing the FAFSA.
We are looking forward to wrapping up the first trimester.
Toodles!
All right. Next up, we'll have Liberty High, John and Mia.
All right. Hello. Mia isn't here today, so I'll just be giving the updates for Liberty. Next week, we'll be concluding our first trimester, and we'll have our finals. There's lots of stuff going on for that. This week, we have Liberty Times, which are basically study halls every single day, except for Thursdays, where students can catch up on their work and make sure that they're ready for those finals. This Saturday, the prom committee is hosting a fundraiser involving dueling pianos. It's a very fun event for prom. Additionally, a group of Liberty students attending the Youth Cyber Summit to learn more about growth and changes in cybersecurity and how it could be applied to their future went there, and they had a great time. Extracurriculars, Liberty had 2 robotic teams. This is our first year with 2 robotics teams, and they attended the first competition of the year and set a great positive precedent for the rest of the year. The Pan Asian Union Student Club is holding a general fundraiser for goods continuing today until November 24th. So all proceeds for that will be donated to the North Liberty Community Pantry. Athletics, this Friday, Liberty's high school, our football team is going to the Dome at UNI. We're really excited about this. We're the only school in Eastern Iowa that is going to the semifinals, and we'll be facing off against Waukee Northwest. We also have lots of cool cross-country news. Liberty's girls cross-country runners, Chelsea Vadipo and Aaliyah Williams, qualified to run at the state cross-country meet, and the boys cross-country team also qualified. Additionally, Keegan Decker, a boys cross-country runner, set the 5th highest time ever at the state meet, running a 5K in under 15 minutes, not 5. Performing arts, we had the school musical, The Murder on the Orient Express, with a lot of turnout. The student-led acting program is also working on their production of Noises Off, and they'll present that soon. We had 29 students accepted to All-State Band, Choir, and Orchestra, respectively. which is amazing. We've had a ton of musical talent in Liberty and lots of people participating. Additionally, all of Liberty's jazz bands have begun to rehearse and are preparing for their winter concert. That's all. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much. Next up, we'll have City High, Alma, and Tobiah.
Hi, everyone. Always good to be here. In honor of this special week, I would like to lead the room in a rendition of Happy Birthday.
Aw.
I assume we don't want to do that.
No,
But
but it's your time.
no, we'll just get into it. I really didn't think I was going to be called on my bluff there. All right. To get into the actual update, City High had 7 National Merit Scholar semifinalists this year, 5 of which were girls. I don't know what that tells you. Probably that I should let Alma speak, though.
We just wrapped up our fall play over the weekend, East of the Sun and West of the Moon. It was a great success, and we also have, As You Like It, a student production going to the state competition, the Thespian Festival, on Friday and Saturday.
City High's Thrift Club has been gathering donations throughout all of the first trimester, and recently they had their pop-up store go up.
Our City High mock trial team has been volunteer coaching the middle school mock trial program, and that's been going well. They came and watched our fall practice scrimmage this Sunday.
Our award-winning journalism team made the All-Iowa News team this year.
Student Senate has been working on club grants for the past couple of weeks, and in total, since 2017, we've given out almost $22,000 to different clubs at City High.
Our Quiz Bowl team had their first competition in Waukee this weekend. They placed 4th.
Our concert choir, recently went on a trip to Kansas City, where they participated in an exchange with 2 other high schools and clinics, and it sounds like it was really fun. There was a hot tub and water slides at the hotel.
Yes. There was also a recent orchestra concert. City High had in all 41 all-state musicians.
That's from orchestra, band, and choir. Our girls and boys cross country recently went to the state meet. They both placed 7th, and then they went to the Nike Cross regional meet, where the girls team placed 1st out of 170 teams in the open division, and the boys team placed 5th.
And we also had 5 girls qualify to state swimming. You already said it.
We already said Student Senate, so that's everything from City High.
Toodles.
But thank you. And next up, we have West High, Waleed and Eddie.
What's up, guys? Starting with our athletics, our football team made it to the quarterfinals, which shows incredible effort and teamwork throughout the year. Our volleyball team made it to playoffs, which shows strong dedication, with 2 charter buses of our students coming to go support them. Our student organizations have been pretty active to support academic success. We have our trimesterly study session going on at Thursday for us to help out students, if they ever need any homework to do, or we'll have tutors there as well. Collaborated with student government and Best of West. BSU hosted a Halloween movie night, bringing students together for a fun and relaxing evening with our Black Student Union for Halloween. And BSU and Unidos, our Hispanic Student Union, recently attended a leadership conference hosted by Elevate, which was also collaborated with BLSU, which is their Black Latinx Student Union from Liberty High, which promotes collaboration and student leadership. Our Muslim Student Association is preparing a gallery food walk for any cultures that want to join, which promotes cultural diversity and for our student body. Which reminds me that our sports in the district are always going against each other, and I love just going. I was at that leadership conference, and I think it was a really nice time just to be able to be with people that aren't from West High, and to be with clubs too. And it made me realize that I feel like clubs should participate more between each other's schools, whether that's through the gallery walk or just having game times with the club. So I think that being able to incorporate that within our district would be a lot of fun. So I'll definitely be talking to the other schools about that. Speaking of participation and leadership, our Business Professionals of America, BPA, went to Des Moines this last weekend to go be a part of the Fall Leadership Conference, which gained valuable experience in leadership, networking, and professional experience.
So, as you guys can tell, and you're probably going to agree with by the end of me talking, it's going to be very club focused. we wanted to point out some community service that's been going on. It's been a major focus within our school as of now. The school's Community Connect Club organized a food drive to stock the school pantry, while students have been volunteering at Melrose Meadows and attending STEM for Youth initiatives at different elementary schools. In fact, Community Connect hosted a school-wide food drive where they collected thousands of pounds of food in order to give to the food pantry and other things of the sorts, which is pretty critical given what's happening right now. In the arts, Cadenza is giving West musicians a wonderful opportunity to perform in front of the school at the end of this week. Pretty exciting and something to brighten up, as we know finals are happening right about now. And furthermore, in the competition sector, there's actually a new club arising called F=MA Society, which is a physics competition club. It actually starts tomorrow, and it's going to be pretty interesting to see how that pans out. It's a new club that's coming to West High, so that should be pretty exciting. And similar to Liberty High, actually, student-produced innovative theater is finally taking a roll on, and we're going to see some acting. Me and Walid are definitely excited for that because we're going to be part of that play. But yeah, similarly, we're going to have some theater. But overall, West High continues to excel, not just in the classroom, but in leadership, service, and spirit. So we're definitely proud of our school, and more to come. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, student reps, and best of luck on your finals this week. Next up, we will get an ICEA update from President Brady Shutt.
Thanks, Brady Shutt for the Iowa City Education Association. Thank you, President Malone, Vice President Abraham, Director, Superintendent Degner. I first want to extend ICEA's congratulations to Director Finch and Board President Malone on your re-elections to our Board of Directors, and to Director-elect Jennifer Horn-Frazier on her recent election. We look forward to working with all of you and helping the district be great. I would also like to thank Laura Ebinger and the Iowa City School District Foundation. As you'll see in tonight's presentation, the foundation's work and the partnership that they have with us is really integral to the success that we have, because they provide all sorts of amazing experiences for our students. And we really couldn't do the work that we love to do without Laura and her team. So our thank you to her. And then on Veterans Day, a sincere thanks and appreciation for our veterans, including Directors Eastham and Williams. I am proud to say and thankful that the district did agree in our negotiations process to include Veterans Day as paid leave for our employees who are veterans or who are serving in good standing with our armed forces. So a shout out to Chief Human Resources Officer and the Chief Negotiator, Nick Proud, and then to Director Williams as well. She was on that team. So I think that's a fantastic and well-deserved addition to our contracts. So thank you.
Thank you so much. And that takes us to community comment. Thank you for your interest in the Iowa City Community School District and for your willingness to share your comments. You are reminded to give your name, address, and topic on which you plan to speak about. During community comment, persons may speak to the board about topics relevant to the districts. Speakers who make comments are reminded that they are responsible for their own statements and may be subject to legal action for those which include hate speech and that are threatening, harassing, or defamatory in nature. It is expected that speakers will address the board and each other with civility and abide by the stated time limits. All community comments directed at non-agenda items and agenda items shall take place at the beginning of the meeting and will be limited to 4 minutes per speaker and 5 minutes for speaker who has the assistance of an interpreter. The initial community comment period will be limited to 1 hour. Remaining in community comment to the extent necessary will take place at the end of the meeting. The board will not engage in any discussion during the public comment period. The role of the board during this time is to listen. Any individual who does not abide by these rules or otherwise disrupts the meeting may be asked to leave and or referred to law enforcement. And our community commenter for tonight is Deb Scholeman.
Good evening, Deb Scholerman. I live at 867 Cypress Court, not too far from here. And I'm talking about interpreters and Healthy Kids Clinic. We overlapped a little bit at Southeast. So I'm Deb Schollerman. I'm a retired Spanish teacher. I taught at Southeast for several years until 2013, then I subbed at City High until 2019. I was there the last day that before school shut down. I now serve as an interpreter for the Healthy Kids Clinics and continue as an interpreter for parent-teacher conferences. I've interpreted at the Healthy Kids Clinic for several years, and I'm here just to share how important these clinics are. The care provided by these clinics, is immeasurable. We are the medical home for many families in the district, and they rely on us for their children's health care. Last Thursday, I worked at Northwest Middle School. I was really impressed with the new clinic space, which is beautiful, spacious, and efficiently laid out, much better than what we had before. But what impressed me the most was the amazing teamwork between the clinic staff, the pediatrician, and the interpreters, and the school staff. So late in the morning, the pediatrician and interpreter had a long conversation with one of the parents, a mom. And a few minutes after that was over, then somebody from the admin team and somebody from special ed, the special ed teacher came, and there was another half-hour conversation about how to best serve this student who was struggling big time in school. And they came up with a plan that included both what the parent and the school district, the teachers, the staff at Northwest was going to do. So the rest of the day was a variety of patients, mostly vaccinations, some wild child checkups. Yesterday, I interpreted at the dental clinic. Some of the children come there for their regular exam and cleaning, but the majority are coming because of tooth pain. And we know how that can interfere with your school attention. Some of them, the kids are referred by the pediatricians from the health clinic because they'll notice, oh, these are cavities. So yesterday we saw 9 patients. It's about an average. The pediatric dentist, Beth Full, some of you might know her, has compiled an amazing team of volunteers. We provided exams, x-rays, cleanings, fluoride applications, and treatment for cavities, mostly crowns, but sometimes it takes a tooth extraction or more. And there's always dental health education, which is one of the roles that I have. Every family leaves with a thorough explanation of the treatment that their child received and instructions for any aftercare needed. So I'm just here to share the good news. About those clinics and how vital they are. Sorry. This is dear to my heart. How vital they are to the students in our district. And to thank you for your ongoing support of the clinics and interpreters in the district. And tomorrow I will be at Longfellow interpreting for parent-teacher conferences. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is approval for tonight's agenda. Is there a motion to approve?
I move approval of the agenda.
Seconded.
Board Secretary Coven, ready to vote?
Online voting is open.
I have to refresh it every time.
Yeah.
All votes have been cast and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
Thank you. Before we get to tonight's consent agenda, did any directors who reviewed the bills this cycle have any questions or comments? Are there any items that directors would like to have pulled from tonight's consent agenda?
President Malone, I'd like to pull item 8, and under that item, the West High, I'm trying to get it here, the West High baseball and softball relocation.
Okay, so Appendix 9, specifically to ask about the West High relocation baseball field. Anything else? All right. Is there a motion to approve tonight's consent agenda minus that item?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Board Secretary Covin, ready to vote?
Online voting is open. All votes have been cast and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
Okay, that takes us to the item pulled from consent agenda, Appendix 9. Director Eastham.
Thank you very much, President Malone. I would just like to understand that this particular item doesn't commit us or does not commit us yet to the specific, maybe the specific location of the baseball field, but in particular, it still allows us to continue to work with the residents around the site to address their sightline concerns that they've raised in the past. If I'm not being specific enough, let me know.
Yep, so this specific item is only to hire the architect and engineer, which will allow us to have more deeper conversations regarding those items you mentioned.
Okay, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Are there any other questions or comments regarding this item? Hearing none, is there a motion?
I move to approve item 8, the West High softball and baseball field item.
It's Appendix 9.
Appendix 9, I'm sorry, yes.
Thank you.
Second.
All right. Board Secretary Covin, ready to vote?
Online voting is open. All votes have been cast and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
Thank you. That takes us to tonight's public hearing of the district calendars for 2026, 2027, 2027, 2028, 2028, and 2029. Vice President Abraham, take it away. That's okay.
Now is the time and place for the public hearing on the proposed ICCSD 26-27, 2027-28, 2028-29 district calendars. The purpose of the public hearings is to receive public input on the district's proposed calendars. As part of a rolling 3-year calendar system, the board will approve the 26-27 district calendar and acknowledge the draft 27-28 and 28-29 district calendars at the December 9th, 2025 annual meeting. Are there any comments from the board?
Can I ask questions or am I limited to comments during these public hearings? Because I have 2 questions, but I can couch them as comments.
Take a shot.
So my first question is, I noticed for 27, 28, 28, 29, that our winter break, it's my understanding that our teachers have really appreciated having 2 full weeks of winter break, and I know the dates don't fall well, but in those upcoming years, it's not 2 full weeks. It's like a break on a Wednesday and then a come over. And I know there's the calendar committee, but I just wanted to ask if that was preferable, given the way that the Christmas date falls.
Yep. Thanks, Director Williams. We did, on the calendar committee, talk through that, and on those 27, 28, and 28, 29 calendars, did recognize that there may be some feedback that comes our way that we would, of course, be open to. It gets somewhat tricky when, with the dates. We ran into one, I think, a couple years ago where it was like Friday the 23rd and we were still in school. And so that was where we got a lot of feedback from folks that just doesn't work. And so I think the committee which has teacher representation, so I appreciate you, bringing that up, is willing to have a split break like that, and is of course open to further, communication on those two that are sort of the placeholders and not the one you're voting on directly as official calendar. So, Chris, there's other folks who are on that. I hope that states where we were at. Yeah.
Perfect. And
So,
then,
thank you. Yeah.
Then my other question, and maybe keep the mic, Brady, but we had that big fall break
Yeah.
2 or 3 years ago, and the
Yep.
feedback that I got from the teachers, a 5-day weekend, because there were 3 days,
Yeah.
was that it was amazing and
Yep.
it was great and it was a really nice way you get into school and then the refresh, but it hasn't appeared since then, and it's
Yeah.
not going to appear in the next 3 years. Is that just, again, an unfortunate way with how the dates fall?
It's unfortunate. Yeah, appreciate that question. That was a marvelous fall break. One of our challenges, as we all know, is you can't start students before the 23rd of August. We have cultural representation days that do rotate across the calendar, which makes it challenging because they aren't landing on the same day of the week or time in September or October when we talk about fall breaks. We're mindful of the board's recommendation not to have school in the second or first full week of June, and so that sort of changes our back end part of it. So we sort of get bookmarked by that desire of the board, which we recognize and appreciate on June, and then the state's requirements. So we on the committee are always seeking that ability to have some sort of fall break that looks like that. It just becomes like, I would love in the next year's iterations if we start seeing that again. It just was really hard this year with where the dates landed. And we, in the next 3, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And then I guess one comment, maybe on the draft calendars, I know that the calendar online now has the culture, the reason for the days off, and it lists the cultural observance days. If we could get those on the draft, I think it makes it easy, at least for me, to follow along with, all right, this day is, Yom Kippur, and
Yeah.
this is Diwali, and they just didn't
Yeah.
line up in September for a full break this year. If
We should
could
be able to do that for the December meeting. We'll just attach the
Yeah,
version
perfect.
of the calendar that's got the dates listed, so. Yep.
Thank you.
We're asking for them in a different context and they're at the bottom of the calendar, Director Williams.
Oh, are they at the bottom of?
Second page on there. Yep.
Scroll down.
Oh, is there a
The
second
detailed
page?
Yeah.
version.
It is.
Yeah, so and maybe we don't need to do that then, but I was just looking at the first page and like where it says like September 21st, no school district closed, like hyphen
On
Yom
the
Kippur.
right-hand side. Sure.
Yes,
Sure.
that's what I was hoping for.
Okay.
Oh, I see what you, okay.
First, I want to say I'm happy that we're not going into that second week of June, so I appreciate that. Since we're phrasing comments as questions, I wonder how amendable there would be to any sort of calendar changes if there was some sort of legislative change to allow us to start school earlier, or if that is.
We would likely re-engage the calendar committee immediately.
Okay.
If you have a way to make that happen, we would encourage you to use it.
But that wouldn't necessarily, it'd be like one of the future 2 years. So when we put in the calendar right now for 26, 27, it's locked in place for 26, 27, or do we have any?
It's always under your purview to change the calendar. Like we've had, trying to think why we brought you guys another calendar, another circumstance one year. Maybe it was because of some, I think we had to have
Snow
some
days.
approval because of missed
Snow
time
days.
for inclement weather. So we can always bring an updated calendar back to you. So if there'd be a legislative change this spring, I think we'd evaluate how late that change is. Would we want to change the start date of the next school year? Are we even able to? But we would certainly have the ability to do that, Director Lingo.
Yeah, thank you.
I'd just like to say that I really appreciate the work that the calendar committee has done and continues to incorporate and include cultural significant days that were asked by many people in the district to recognize during the course of the year. And I'm sure that, we don't hit everything exactly like, everyone wants, but I think we're much better now than we were several years ago.
Are there any comments from the public?
All right, so that will close that public hearing. Thank you. Next up, that takes us to policy review, and I will turn it over to Director Williams, who chairs Policy and Governance, to take us through those 5 policies listed.
Thank you. I will be brief. Starting with the 300 series, this is our second read for those, and we covered them at our last meeting. And so unless there are questions or comments, I think we're all familiar with those. The 200.3R1, we've also talked a lot about, and we may want to talk about it from the board table tonight, but that is our policy that's going to address how selection for meetings are made. We have the policy primers on there and the animal policies. Again, those we discussed last meeting and we're voting on tonight. And then new are our 400 series, which we talked about at P&G today. The few that caught my eye, there's a strikeout of an entire policy, and we received the explanation because that conflicts a little bit, or doesn't conflict a little bit. It conflicts with state law regarding abuse of students by district employees, so we wanted to remove that language. And then the update to the substance-free workplace added cannabis and THC to prohibited substances, again to align with BOE policy, that those substances are treated similar to alcohol by the BOE when they're determining whether or not teacher misconduct has happened. And I think those were our major ones. Oh, the salary placement, that the admin team has worked out some ways that our teachers can be replaced or advanced.
Any comments? Oh, thank you, Director Williams. Any comments from other directors on the committee or that attended Policy and Governance regarding any of the policies? Okay. That will then take us to our discussion items for tonight. And the first discussion item is SNAP benefits that I think Superintendent Degner.
I just have a couple brief comments about this. You saw our district communication at the end of the week, and really the purpose of that was to try to make sure families in the district were engaged and informed with opportunities that were available through the district or in our local community to address food insecurity with the recent government shutdown. We hope we're towards the end of that process, but at the same time, we know this has been burdensome for a lot of our families in the district. And so I would also just acknowledge, super proud of our students and our school leaders. You heard a few of the students comment at the podium tonight about some of the local drives that have been stood up in our schools, and just really the initiative of our educators to make sure that need is met. We know that those core needs, if they're not met by our students and families first, learning is going to be really hard to achieve. And so really proud of their work and their efforts in that, and our district team as well, Corrine Frank and Shannon Hammond-Miner, in some of their work to make sure that we had a coordinated effort and connected with our local partners. So without reading that whole communication back to you, we kind of broke it down into what you could count on at school, where you could find community food resources, and then also just knowing how they can continue to access free and reduced price meals if their status has changed.
Great. Thank you. Were there any comments from directors or questions?
I just want to echo what Superintendent Degner just mentioned about our students and how impressed we are. Those students went door to door in my neighborhood and other neighborhoods to get food, so it was just really commendable, and I'm super proud of them. So thanks for mentioning that.
All right. Next up is the City High School outdoor field recommendation and soccer survey data. Superintendent Degner, did you want to start us off?
Yeah, I'll kick it off, and then I'll have Kurt kind of take you through the memo there, and of course we'll entertain any questions you have. So we were asked to get some data from our soccer families, and so we had administered a survey that we produced the results back to you there that are attached to the agenda item. And then I'd asked the team to put together a memo that kind of explained what our initial recommendation was and what it continues to be. And so with that, I'll let Chief Operating Officer Pratt add any additional information that's relevant, and then, like I said, answer your questions.
Good evening, all. As you can see from the memo, we've got a lot of data there, both from a survey standpoint and some historical context. So if you recall, the original FMP 2.38 indicated replacing the existing turf field in its current location with so basically updating the surface that is utilized by our girls soccer team, our men's soccer team, football practice field, marching band practice field, among other activities. As we dug into it, there were a lot of reasons why that specific location was determined and that specific surface was determined 12 years ago. There were some drainage issues within the whole area. The field that was there previously was highly utilized, meaning it was hard to keep a good playable surface just because of the amount of usage it got from both within the district and the community at large. So upon direction of the board, we developed a survey that was sent to all high school soccer families, regardless of age or grade, and similarly any middle school families that were already registered within the Bound system. And so you can see on the board agenda, there's a lot of different groups broken out by different things. One of the things we wanted to call your attention to, among all respondents, there was a 47% preference for artificial turf, 42% preference for natural grass, and 11% had no preference at all. So that's tough data to come back with, right? Like, it's kind of split down the middle. And even if you disaggregate the data by sex, it was even split among those sexes, right? It wasn't completely clear one way or another within one group that there was a strong preference either way. And so as we dug into it more, high school players' parents seemed to prefer the artificial turf. Boys soccer had a preference for artificial turf. Girls soccer was at 38%, which was not unexpected necessarily based on some of the research and data and the community discussion that was happening around the issue. But overall, again, we had 47% that preferred the artificial turf. So some of the qualitative insights that came out within the community, the artificial turf allows year-round play without cancellations due to weather, supports multiple sports and activities, provides a consistent playing surface, and obviously less ongoing maintenance. Some of the concerns with natural grass were maintenance difficulty and high costs to keep the field playable. I was reading one comment earlier that said somebody who clearly played a lot of soccer across the state, there were only 2 fields that they would rate a 10 out of 10 in terms of grass fields that were maintained to a high level. One was the University of Iowa and the other was Muscatine, right? And so we have 2 within our own district and they didn't make this person's 10 out of 10 high list. So obviously, we've talked about the overuse and wear for multiple teams within that area. We looked at other options, which are the alternative considerations that we deem not viable. So replace the existing surf with a sand cap natural grass surface and install artificial turf on Bates Field. This was kind of if we wanted to have the best of both worlds for either sport, either gender, what have you. Bates, unfortunately, the football field is not wide enough to support a regulation soccer field. It would actually have to completely redo the track orientation. It would have to get wider so you're running on a curve more often. So we didn't view that we had the budget money necessarily to complete that project. And then replacing the artificial turf on the upper practice fields, and then that would allow then the grass field to be on the current location. That upper practice field is not actually large enough due to other obstructions to host either a full-size football practice field, full-size soccer practice field. That's where our discus and shot put throwing lanes are. I mean, the story I'm telling you is City High doesn't have a lot of extra space for these things, right? And so they have to make the most with what they have, which the artificial turf allows them to do. So those were the discussions that led to our recommendation to proceed as forward with replacing the artificial turf in its current location.
Thank you. Did directors have any questions or comments?
I just have a couple. One, Kurt, can you remind me what soccer surfaces we have at West and North Liberty?
Those are both grass surfaces.
Okay, thank you. And then secondly, there were a number of comments about grass. A disadvantage of grass is maintaining it as an excellent playing surface over the course of a season. Can you maybe say something about our capacity to maintain grass soccer fields?
Sure. I mean, I think I would feel comfortable stating we could provide what Liberty and West have at City High. I mean, we are doing that. You would have to ask those families how they felt it was maintained overall. One of the nice things about both of those fields is they were designed wide enough that we can actually move the field from year to year, right? So the goal shifts, so our goalie spot doesn't get so worn down in the same spot year after year that creates a hardship to keep grass there. City High, we don't, even if we were recommending putting a grass field where that artificial turf is, because there's a water main that runs kind of behind the berm, if you're familiar with that site, we would not have the room to be able to shift that like that. And so it would have wear patterns in it that we would struggle to maintain.
Okay, thank you. And last, President Malone, can you say anything in addition to what's before us about the injuries experienced by women soccer players on turf as opposed to grass?
You want me to? Sorry, I thought you directed that at President Malone.
No. I'm sure President Malone doesn't want to hear that question directed to her. So no to you.
Certainly. So obviously Director Williams had sent us some research articles that indicated there was a higher level of risk for female athletes, particularly potentially tearing an ACL within an artificial turf surface. I read through them and I couldn't argue against them by any means. It looked like one of them had 7 studies that were called out, three for professional athletes on turf surfaces, 3 for college athletes on turf surfaces, then the one was kind of a hybrid. And so while the data didn't support or didn't show a specific high school athlete injury, I think we could, whether it's conjecture or whatever you want to call it, you could say that extends to the high school level. I think some of the discussion we could possibly have is, are there other opportunities available so that we could have the best of both worlds? But we haven't had that larger discussion because I think we would all believe that we really want both teams to be on site. And so if we want both teams to be on site, unfortunately, this is going to be the recommendation.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks, Charlie, for those questions. I have some similar ones. So I'll piggyback with your last question with the safety. I looked at the data for the benefits of grass and concerns with turf answers and and it looks like 58% of respondents indicated a benefit of grass is reduced injuries, and then not shockingly, that same percentage pulled through. 58% with turf were concerned about increased injuries. But I noticed on the memo that it says that we're going to ensure that new turf technology meets modern safety standards, including the use of improved infill materials and effective surface temperature management. And then later on in the memo, it says that we are going to replace the existing turf with a modern, safe turf system. So I'm wondering, can you provide some more information about what safety improvements we expect to see with this new generation of turf?
Yep. So Liberty High is probably our best example where there's actually a shock absorbing pad underneath the surface. And that technology, I think, is initially geared more toward concussions, trying to limit concussion data, especially for football players who are falling on the turf. I would need to do research on my own to see if that also helps with ACL injuries, because we want to make sure that it's supposed to be a soccer surface first, right? So we want to make sure it's better off for soccer in the long run. But that's sort of the next generation. The two things that, I think within one of the research articles, they kept talking about V2 and V3 turf surfaces. So the two things that keep changing with these things are the fibers themselves, which literally the manufacturers refer to as the carpet, and then the infill material, right? And so when they first came out, there was no infill. It was just grass that was like this tall on concrete, and everybody hated it, right? Those were kind of the version 1. Version 2 is when they started to use the rubber, and then versions 3 and forward is where they've experimented with different fibers. And so some of the fibers are a single strand, and then some of them are kind of a netting. The netting is more meant for football use. The single strand is meant for soccer because the single strand is more meant to mimic how the ball is going to roll within soccer. And so the infill materials, you can do rubber. There's other things. The bigger driver on that is, well, there's two drivers on that. The field temperature, because that's a concern too, right? But then also the surface and how it compacts and safety of footing and all that stuff. And so there's always changes and improvements, but just with anything else, it's what quality do you want to pay for, right? You can go all the way to the bottom or you can go all the way to the top. Yeah.
That was going to be my next question.
Sure.
Is what quality are we going to pay for within our budget?
We lean on our design teams to kind of help us outline that. And so we've actually paused this project while we have this discussion, but we'll have that discussion if we can move forward.
Okay. And if we can, we're going to try to install.
Yeah, we want to do the
safest-
best we can within the budget we have.
Okay.
Yeah.
Will you, if there are questions, can we have the opportunity to look at the different, but again, one of my primary concerns is safety for our student athletes, right? And so if it's a hard decision to make, I would at least like it to come back to the board before we bless a lower budget, less safe turf. And I know we don't have any money, right? Like, I mean, Matt's just looking at me like, okay, Director Williams. Another question I had, though,
Before you move on there, Director Williams, I mean, we would bring back the schematic design, right? Similar to how we're doing field houses later tonight, we would bring back a schematic design to you on this.
Okay, so we can see at that point.
Right.
And we could even, you know, if we're really struggling, we can bid as an alternate. Hey, here's the base bid. What's the next upgrade or what we believe is safer, and have that bid as an alternate, and then we can see, okay, yeah, we can include that and move forward.
I just, the feedback that I've gotten personally, but also I think that's really laid out in this memo is and our data that you all collected is that, you know, 58% of our players and parents are worried about safety. And so the more we can assuage those concerns by saying, hey, listen, we get it, you're worried about safety, but we're really going to put in we're going to make it as safe as possible. I think that will be really helpful to the dialogue. Do we know, we had a community commenter and there were some questions about this on the survey. Do we know if the primary lines, the markings on the field are going to be soccer markings?
Yeah, that's our intent.
Okay.
That we would kind of, as best as we can, hide the football lines, if you will. There's 18 different ways you can do that, right? So, I mean, I think one of the things we talked about, at least in some early design meetings before we stopped that and slowed that down, was soccer would be white or yellow, and then everything else would be something that's a little more muted.
Okay. And then my last question is, a lot of the feedback on this data, right, whereas would love to play on grass, but it's impossible to maintain it at that level. So we want turf. I think that was a really strong theme that came through the data. My question is, you know, my understanding is Bates is grass and it's beautifully maintained. How are we able to maintain Bates so well?
It doesn't get the traffic.
So what are we using Bates for?
Football games. So the football team practices on the artificial turf, and so the marching band practices on the artificial turf, and so there really is not the same traffic between the two, and so really what drives the ability to maintain is the amount of traffic you allow on it.
So that whole football field that's grass is only used for home football games during the fall.
I think they play lower level soccer games if there's a conflict on it, but I may be mistaken on that. But I think they try to avoid that as much as possible.
Okay.
But yeah, but even marching band does not even practice on the football field outside of their performances during the games.
I mean, one of the things that you mentioned is City High has all these space constraints, right? But it seems like it's a self-imposed issue to some extent because they're not using 100 yards of space for their activities, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
I mean, in an absolute ideal world, Bates would be wide enough, whatever the surface was, grass or artificial turf, to host both sports.
Yeah.
Because that's obviously where majority of your seating is, your bathrooms are, all that stuff. But like I said previously, that requires a significant reconfiguration of the track that was not planned for in FMP 2.3.
But we wouldn't have to reconfigure the track to move like marching band down there.
No. Because, I mean, marching band surface is a football field, right? And it's already,
Right.
it's already
a
doing
football
that.
field.
Yeah.
But they can't do that because the grass has to be maintained for those home football games.
I think we've had, I mean, like a similar concern that's come up before, like marching bands practiced on the baseball field at West, right? Because of proximity to the building. And then, you know, what concern we've had there is the ongoing deterioration of the baseball outfield and concerns from the community on that. And so I think the reason the band obviously has used the turf, right, is because then you don't deteriorate the condition of the football field. You're just on the artificial surface. There's probably also some weather implications about whether it's wet or that. And we've talked before, too, about just the general proximity to the building a little bit closer to save some time on there. But you're right. I mean, there isn't a ton of traffic down on Bates. We also, you know, during the spring season, you might have some traffic on the infield of a track meet, you know, something like that. But, yeah, I mean, there's some uniqueness on each of the campuses. I think that was why this artificial surf was originally compelling at City High, because of, again, trying to get something more approximate to the building that multiple groups could use. And then eventually soccer kind of moved on to the space, and that's the way it's continued until today.
Well, I appreciate it. I should have led with this. Thank you for sending. I know it slowed down the stuff a little, but I really do appreciate the team sending out the survey to the soccer parents, collecting the data. I know it was important to them, that community, that they felt heard in this process. So I do really appreciate you all doing that. Thank you.
Just a clarifying question, and I'm not sure if I missed this in the discussion, but the type of turf that we have there now and the type of turf that you're planning on putting there, it is an upgrade, correct?
Mm-hmm.
What
Yep.
is the type of turf that we have there now?
It's an early version of the single strand. I'd probably call it a version 1 if I were just dating it, because it seems like about every 5 years is kind of when the technology rolls over. But what is there, what happens that you have to replace these fields is the fibers start breaking down. And if you go walk out there now, the fiber and the rubber have kind of just become one surface. And so like, we had a meeting out there and there was some much smaller kids kicking soccer balls, and they were kind of able to kick them from one end to the other because the ball doesn't stop, because the fibers have broken down so much that it's just rolling forever.
Okay, yeah. I've heard a lot of the players like playing on that field because of that reason.
Yeah.
But yeah, the upgrade sounds great. Thank you.
How will, and I'm not trying to belabor the point because we have a long meeting still, how does the abundant use of this turf surface figure into, like, how often we will need to replace it, what kind of surface you pick in the first place? Because it sounds like over at Liberty, it's just getting used for, well, not, I guess they don't have it, but, you know, just, that's just something that's coming to the back of my mind. Because if you have football practicing there, you have soccer in the spring, you have marching band throughout the summer and fall, how does that factor in?
So I want to preface my answer with that I am supportive of our arts and I am supportive of marching band. But what I've always been told is that marching band is actually hardest on these fields, because think about what marching band is. It's essentially just your feet kind of in the same spot, up and down. And it's a flat-soled shoe, right? And so that is what kind of ages these things a little more. Your average soccer game, your average football practice, while they do damage, I would say a good night of marching band practice or a good long day of marching band practice probably does about as much damage as anything, again, because it's that constant just in the same spot, your feet up and down. That's what compacts it, and that's what kind of breaks it down a little quicker. But again, supportive of marching bands, supportive of our arts.
Thank you.
Okay, the only comment I have, do you have what you need for us to move forward, or?
I believe so, yes.
Okay.
We'll plan to bring back that schematic design when we have it, so you can see what we landed on.
And I will try to get a sample.
Great. Thank you so much. Next up, it takes us to our enrollment and budget impact.
All right, I'll give Chief Financial Officer Kerr some time to come up to the podium here. Last week, or excuse me, a couple weeks ago, I presented some information to you about enrollment and where we were at as a district and the loss that we saw in certified enrollment along with some other UEN districts or with the other UEN districts. And we saw that was kind of a perpetual trend throughout the state, that there was only really 3 districts, one substantially that grew. The rest of the districts were seeing, downward trends. The information I didn't have that night is, of course, how that impacts the budget. I think you'll hear from Adam that, of course, it's not insignificant. It's a significant impact anytime we lose that many students. But he's got his new tool that they get every November and some assumptions built in that, of course, we're ready to kind of show you how those could be manipulated or changed as well, or as we continue to solve for those variables as we work through the budget planning process, what that'll look like along with then that 5-year projection. So with that, I'll let Adam take it away, and please feel free to ask questions.
All right, thank you very much. And I just do want to say that I feel the need to defend how much marching band students move on a regular basis as a former marching band member, but either way. I haven't been up here for a while, so I appreciate your patience with me as I've been out for a little while here, especially as we've had enrollment come in, some other things. So excited to go through some information. There are actually 3 items that I have on the agenda tonight, and the others will probably refer back to this rather than being full presentations. So I will welcome your questions as well. But I did want to walk through a couple of things as it relates to the impact of enrollment, also the impact of SSA on both our budget and then also our unspent balance ultimately. And I'm going to use this tool kind of live because I think it's probably the best way to show some of those impacts. And before I get started with it, one thing that's just critical, and I feel like I say it a lot, but it's really important, is the tremendous impact of both enrollment and of SSA rates on our budget, especially as you move down into 3, 4, 5 years out, because all of those impacts are cumulative. And so this year we obviously had an unexpectedly large decline in students. We had projected a decline in students, but what we saw was larger than we would have expected. Just like last year, we had an unexpected increase in students. And I've spent some time looking into the data and have some ideas of kind of what may have driven this year's changes. But ultimately, one thing that's important to keep in mind from a budget standpoint is that 14 months ago, we projected that we were going to have 55 fewer students right now today than we have today. And so that's kind of a mitigating factor with the decline that we saw, is that in large part, not one for one, pretty close to it, it essentially canceled out what we saw the year before. So we still get that 1-year budget benefit, but obviously we would have preferred to have that, roll forward and accumulate. So either way, this model that I have up on the screen is reflective of current year. So this has all of our current year data. We plug, sorry, I'm trying to make sure that I can actually get this to work properly. Come on. This is like the largest spreadsheet in the world. I was telling Secretary Colvin earlier today that I was really hoping this wouldn't like bog down under the weight of this system. So either way, I guess I'll get started on this one. I was going to start with enrollment, but instead I'm going to start with SSA. So you can see here that I have plugged in, as recommended, a 2% SSA rate for the coming 5 years. Do I think it's probably going to be 2%? Probably not each of those years. But at the same time, that's a recommended average. And so rather than trying to guess year to year going forward, establish that at 2%. That has a huge impact. And you can see up here at the top, the unspent authorized budget is what we have projected with the model right now at the end of this year that we're in, which is about $8.85 million. increasing 12.3, 14, 14, and then you start to see a decline, which we've seen in our modeling before, and we've talked about the need to pay attention to that and come back and look at both the expenditure side and also look at, other factors as we get more information moving forward. But the impact of this is tremendous. So for example, you see these numbers, 8.8, 12.3, 14.2. If we went to 1.25 for one of those years, it doesn't impact this year because this year is already set. But you see instead of peaking at 14 million, we're now peaking at 12.5. And we start to see that decline a little bit earlier, even though we left all of the other years at 2%. Same thing in terms of, if we roll this forward, if we were to have, a substantial period where we were closer to that 1.25%, you start to see again, by this, with this one, we'd be in the negative at the end of the 6-year period that I have on here. One of the questions that I received a while ago from Director Eastham was essentially, what's the virtue of maintaining an unspent balance? What's the benefit of that? And this demonstrates the benefit of that, is that, ultimately we're at a point now, and we finished last year at just over $5 million unspent balance. We're at a point now that even when we see potentially substantially low SSA rates or large enrollment declines, it doesn't become an immediate crisis the way that it might have a couple of years ago. And so we have some cushion that's built in, that's the purpose of it, so that if this were reality, if we found that we ended up at 1 or 1.25 or 1.5% this year, and we thought that that might be the same based upon the state's financial picture for the coming couple of years, we'd update, but as you can see in the model here, we'd still have a couple of years, or at least a full year, to develop a response to that and determine how we're going to strategically respond rather than having to cut programs kind of in the moment. Again, the guidance that, I have is this 2%. This is always incredibly difficult to forecast, and until the legislative session begins, until the governor's recommendation is out, and particularly in a year with obviously elections at the State House, but also at the governor level, this is very difficult to, determine what this is going to be. I look at it and I think that it's a challenge to see how they would cut this number really low in an election year. So I guess I think the floor for this year coming up is probably not much lower than 2. The other thing to keep in mind, though, and it's important for all of you to be aware of, is that if the state is looking to cut expenditures, reducing SSA much below 2 has really diminishing returns in terms of what they're saving. And the reason for that is the budget guarantee. So when a school district has declining enrollment or has flat enrollment and SSA falls to 0, the budget guarantee can kick in. And essentially what that is a guarantee that our funding at a base level for next year will be no lower in real dollars than our funding for this year, unless we're already on the budget guarantee, and then it's kind of a stair-step process. And so that actually mitigates the savings. So let's say the state set SSA at 1% or 0%. That's not a straight savings for them, because with so many districts in Iowa, the vast majority of districts declining in enrollment, the state is guaranteeing that their funding levels that following year are going to at least maintain where they were the year prior, absent the budget guarantee and whatever it kicked in to keep them there. So it's not something that it's confusing. So let's say you have a district. This year, base aid is $10 million. They have a 2% decline in enrollment, and SSA is set at 0%. Right? So that would result in a 2% decline in their funding, but it doesn't, because they're guaranteed that next year's funding would be at that $10 million level. The following year, they're guaranteed that their funding won't fall, like let's say they have another year of declines, they're not stuck at that $10 million level, now they're stuck where they would have been without the budget guarantee kicking in that year. So it kind of delays the decline, but it also means that the state isn't getting a whole lot of bang for its buck going much below 2 or 1.5% because so many districts in the state are declining at a rate that's faster than that in terms of enrollment. I'm going to pause for a second. Any questions?
I'm sorry if I missed this. For fiscal year 28 on,
Yep.
are we assuming a decline in enrollment?
Yes, and that's actually what I wanted to start with, and I'm going to see if it'll let me get there this way. Yes, okay. So one other caveat that I'll share is that you'll actually get a more detailed version of this with the numbers that we really prefer next month. They'll be very similar to this, but this number will probably be negative 0.2% rather than the 0.1. The 0.1 is there because this was the version that we submitted to the SBRC. They require that we submit an average of the previous few years of enrollment change, which for us was that negative 0.1%. Here, if we look at negative 0.2, which is roughly what our forecasts show, they actually show a very slight decrease this year, a slight increase the following, and then some consistent decreases. Then it changes the numbers very slightly. They're very similar. But all of the numbers that we show in this model are based upon enrollment declines assumed. So yes, good question. And this is where I actually wanted to start, if I could have gotten there more efficiently. If we had a roughly 1% decline every single year over the coming 5 years, which is what we had this year, and we kind of cautioned last year, we didn't want to overreact to 1 year change, so we did an update to show huge growth. This year, I'd caution the exact same way. We don't want to overreact to a 1 year change. But if we put in that negative 1%, you'll see that the impact is actually very similar to what I showed with SSA, right? Instead of peaking at that 14 million unspent balance around fiscal 28, fiscal 29, you see a peak around 12.8. So very similar. And then we start to get into a negative situation by fiscal 31. So the effect of these two things are critical, and they're largely co-equal in terms of what we see, either in terms of an SSA rate that is above or below what we kind of consider our baseline. I'm not going to say target because we think our target should be much higher than what we actually receive. And then same thing on the enrollment side, just the inverse. So yeah.
So what we're seeing now with the blue shaded boxes at the top of this chart assumes the 1% decline, but a 2% SSA.
Correct.
So
yep.
like,
so if I combine those things.
Where's like the worst case? Well, you don't, because you only have one meeting left.
Yeah.
Concur.
So
this is the worst case scenario.
Yeah, so this would be probably the worst case scenario. This would assume an enrollment decline roughly the same magnitude that we saw this year, each year for the next 5 years. And this would also assume, and I just plugged it in for 3, I feel like projecting SSA different from 2 out more than that is, I mean, just guessing. But assumes, about a 1.25% SSA rate for the coming 3 years. And again, you can see the value of the unspent balance that we built because we still maintain, up to that roughly 12 million number in 27, down to 10.7, we start to see the decline there, but it still builds in a couple of years for the district to determine in a targeted and strategic fashion what our response needs to be to these inputs.
With the unspent, just the budget overall, what kind of assumptions go into the budget itself as far as like employee expenses increasing, just the general operations of the buildings increasing, things like that?
Yep, that's a good question. That's something that's built throughout this. And so again, what we've submitted here is, based upon, what we're required to submit to the SBRC. So they're reviewing this and that sort of thing. What we really build in, and we had some swings there, and there are a number of reasons for that. But based upon what our negotiation targets, are likely to be, based upon where we think we can afford to be in terms of growth of our unspent balance, where we expect SSA and enrollment to come in. For fiscal 26, this 2.75% reflects what we expect to see this year, given agreements that are already in place. For the purposes of this, I have plugged in 2% for the following year, which would reflect some belt tightening there. And then 2.5 rolling forward from there. If, for example, that variable were to change, you'll see that, again, we're in a situation where we have that same, and this is, again, the worst case scenario, right? This isn't the only change. We still have all those other variables in place. But you'll see that we start to see a really substantial decline as we move into fiscal 29. And, you know, that worst case scenario becomes more of a challenge, but we still have 12, 18, 24 months to, you know, determine what our response needs to be to that. So for the most part, we assume growth across all expenditure areas. So this is not just one area. And then throughout the year, one of the things that happens is we go in here and we look at more specific areas in terms of, you know, whether it's ongoing expenses, one-time expenses. So at this point in the year, we have very little. It reflects things that we know about for sure that are changes either on an ongoing basis or a one-time basis. By the time we roll around to spring, we'll have a lot of more manual adjustments above and beyond whatever we expect as a overall percentage change. So as we get more information throughout the year, this model becomes more accurate than we roll to the next year.
So, Adam, this, what you're having us understand here is the effect of a change, a decrease in enrollment over time. That's in part.
Yep.
So does this application decrease expenses because of decreased enrollment?
It does not. So our assumption there, the kind of worst case one that showed us to getting to negative 23 million is pretty unrealistic because we're probably not going to see consistent increases in expenditures of 2.5% if we're bleeding 1% students every single year, right? And so as we look at the impact of either enrollment gains or enrollment loss, enrollment gains cause more spending. You have to hire people to teach those kids and support that instruction within the district. The same is true if we see enrollment declines. So, you know, when we see enrollment declines, that's where we would look historically to attrition, to other factors to be able to, you know, reduce the number of sections, because even maintaining the same class sizes, we'd still have opportunities to decrease number of sections that we have. We'd look at other support staff across the district, administrative staff, et cetera. But yeah, it's a good question. This does not tie enrollment to anything else in terms of automatically accounting for example, expenditure changes.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. So what I did, and this reflects again the higher expenditure levels, but you can see I moved it back to what my initial assumptions were, and you still see that 8 growing to roughly, you know, that $12 million area, and then a decline from there. So that's something we need to monitor closely in terms of what our expenditure levels are, but also in terms of you know, these inputs and when we get more information. Other questions?
I would just say, you know, some positive credit, you know, is warranted here out of a, yes, not a fun declining enrollment situation, but to the board and to the Adam, to the rest of the team. I mean, some of those hard decisions and some hard work about as we plan for the year through our negotiation process with our employee groups and recognizing what we can and can't do. I think the most valuable lesson about this is we've given ourselves some space to deal with the challenges as the variables get filled in, that we're not in an immediate reaction part. And that's always where we want to be. So back to the point about why it's valuable to have an unspent balance, that's not the situation we inherited. And so when we had a change we had to make, we were forced into some tough decisions right away. Now we have some space to figure those things out as we continue to learn more, which is better for everybody, right? It's better that we have time to process those things and to work through those solutions. So again, thank you to a lot of the people in the room for making that a reality. And that's the playing field we operate in.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
That takes us to the presentation portion for tonight's agenda. And first up, we have interventions and extensions.
So this is a follow-up to our presentation from the previous meeting where we talked about universal core instruction, and this continues to kind of move us up the triangle per se for what we do to intervene and extend our learners. So with that, I'll turn it over to Liza.
Perfect. Thank you. I was going to say, like, now for the good stuff. Well, those numbers are fascinating. This is really fun to be able to present. As Superintendent Degner just mentioned, Carmen presented 2 weeks ago and talked a little bit about what MTSS is, which is the multi-tiered system of supports, and talked about what we do just universally to ensure that all students have access to high quality teaching and learning. And so today what we wanted to do is to talk a little bit about the other two pieces of that triangle, which are Tier 2 and Tier 3. Well, all right. So we are going to review a little bit about what MTSS is and talk about differentiated instruction. I know Director Finch had asked a little bit about that last week, and we said that we would come back talking about how teachers do that on the regular basis, and then get a little bit into Tier 2 and Tier 3 interventions and extensions. So the vocabulary on this slide, several of them are the same as we're just revisiting those same ideas with the MTSS, but we also talk about differentiated instruction and what interventions and extensions are. And again, this is a review of the map, and so what we're going to be talking about today are the yellow and the red pieces. For those of you who have followed education or been in education or been on the board for a while, this picture is actually a newer one and one that I really love because you can see that that green, which was that universal core, actually shows that it goes through all of those layers. A triangle that we used to look at was just two-dimensional. It just showed green, yellow, and red, and it looked like those. And I think that in some past practices, that is what happened, is as soon as a student didn't meet core, they just had something completely different, which would what we would consider a supplanting. Whereas our practice and the true implementation of the multi-tiered system of support is ensuring that that universal core continues to happen. That no matter if a student needs additional support in remediation or reteaching or extension, they're still receiving that universal core instruction all the time. We have talked to you so much the last 4 years as we have implemented and embarked on our high reliability schools journey about professional learning communities or collaborative teams. That is one of the hallmarks of Level 1, and we are super proud to be able to report that every single one of our educators are a part of a professional learning community. Our teachers engage in that process most of the time weekly, and the sole premise of that is to answer these 4 questions. There are 2 additional questions that teams sometimes get to, and that's around like teaching and like their pedagogical beliefs and just continuing to grow as a learner. But these 4 questions are really essential that we are asking ourselves whenever we're engaging in that process. Asking these questions and answering them is really how we identify students and their support that they need, and how we evaluate our overall health of our MTSS system. And so in that process, we're answering that first question is, what do we want students to learn? And that would be our core standards. So if we are looking at our math standards, for example, let's just kind of stay with math for the ease of it. If we're looking at math, we're thinking, what do we want our students to know? So what is that standard? HRS level 2 and 3, we're getting into those proficiency skills. So looking at that, then we go into question 2 is, how do I know if the students learned it? So how do I know what I want them to know? Standards are going to help me determine that. How are we going to know if the students learned it? That's when we're engaging with our common formative assessments. We are doing quick checks, observations to see if students are grasping and understanding of that content. And then we determine, what are we going to do if a student did not learn it? So that would be our question 3. And then question 4 is, how will we extend learning for students who've already demonstrated proficiency? And so in the next section of this presentation, we're really going to focus on questions 3 and 4, as Carmen spent more time last presentation focusing on questions 1 and 2. This slide is just a review of what we had talked about last meeting, but really focusing on those Tier 2 and Tier 3 intervention systems. And so here we are going to talk a little bit about what that actually looks like in our district. We have talked about this previously, but we use a universal screener. It is actually mandated that we use a universal screener in both reading and math in grades actually pre-K through 6, but then we utilize it all the way up through middle school and high school to make sure that we are identifying students that could potentially be at risk for not being proficient in reading, math, or social emotional learning. And so a universal screener is given typically 2 to 3 times a year. The best analogy that we use with our teachers is it's just essentially a temperature check. So you go to the doctor, the first thing they do is they take your temperature. If you have a fever, then you're going to do some additional things. If you don't have a fever, we continue on with our universal core instruction and we'll continue to provide teaching and assessment around specific standards. But a universal screener helps us determine who are students that may be at risk for not being proficient in reading and math. So this chart just illustrates the different universal screeners that we utilize in Iowa City in order for us to have a good idea of who we may need to provide some additional assessments to see where they may need additional instruction or intervention or extension is needed. One thing that you may be familiar with, but do want to call out that is a little bit different this year, in social emotional learning, we use the Panorama screener that is consistent with the screener that our secondary schools were using that was in Panorama. You may have known that previously as MySabers. So MySabers was a screener that we were using in 2 through 6 prior to our 6th graders moving over to the middle school. But this year we are now using the Panorama screener in grades 3 through 5. Our second graders really struggled with the social emotional screener because the vocabulary was brand new for them. And so the data that we were receiving from that wasn't helpful in terms of providing interventions and supports in that. And so we moved to grades 3 through 5, and we give that Panorama screener twice a year. So once we have information around our screener and once we have information around like that question 2 in PLC or what are we doing if students aren't grasping that concept, the first thing that we always go to is differentiated instruction. We know that our kids come into our classrooms at various different places, various subjects all throughout every grade. And so differentiated instruction is essentially teachers differentiating or doing different instruction to provide supports for students. We call in the education world scaffolds because we like to do things just a little bit different. So how we scaffold and provide supports to students so that they can have access to the core content. And so this is something that is extremely challenging, and our teachers work so hard to ensure that they are providing accommodations, resources, scaffolds, supports to students so that they can access the core content. And so these are things that we are using all of the time to ensure that students have access to the universal core instruction. The way that we determine if differentiation is necessary, and it is necessary in every single classroom, is there is not a classroom anywhere where students are all coming with the same prior knowledge, the same background or skills that they need in order to grasp that new content. But they are continuously assessing the student's level of understanding. We are always preaching using a convergence of data from screeners, unit assessments, common formative assessments, observation. Teachers, the majority of the time, they can watch a student do something and determine if they need help. Sometimes we use those common formative assessments. A lot of times those are used for us to determine the effectiveness of our teaching and what we need to do differently. But using a convergence of data is a way that we're able to determine if a student's content needs to be scaffolded or their independent work needs to be a little bit different so that they can start to access core material. So I would say that differentiated instruction is a part of that green piece. If I had still my anchor chart here where I had the MTSS, that would be something that we're doing for everybody, no matter what, just to provide them access to that. And so ways that we do that in reading, math and SEL in elementary, is small group reading. We use a small group reading, the blueprint model from the Iowa Department of Education that ensures that students are engaged in small group reading in a frequent basis based off of their needs. And those small group reading is usually 1 to no more than 6 kids that are in a small group during that time. We would then level or scaffold their independent work based on what they need and what supports they might need in order to access that core. And we do at times use Lexia Core 5, which is an adaptive online learning platform that students would log into if they have independent time after they've worked with their classroom teacher in that small group reading. And that platform actually gives us an abundance of data to show how students are answering and skills that they might be getting hung up on. And so then we can intervene or provide supports in a small group setting during intervention time. Math. One thing that we've been really excited to see is our kids engaged in centers work, which is a part of our new illustrative math curriculum. And so centers are not in all grades, it's in our primary grades is when centers show up in that curriculum, but that is a way that we're able to provide differentiated instruction in math by determining what centers students might need in order to enhance the skills that they might be lacking. Happy Numbers is an online platform that some teachers utilize. We used to use a program called Dreambox. You may be familiar with that. That was, those of you that have children that were learning at home during COVID got real familiar with the voice on Dreambox. It might appear back in your nightmares. Happy Numbers is a little bit different, but again, adaptive and support students around those standards. And teachers have the ability to go in and look at that data to see how students are performing on standards and provide intervention if needed. We have math language routines and high yield routines that we utilize to provide differentiated instruction. But one thing that I'm most proud of, our curriculum team worked with some teachers over the past year and a half to create the visual vocabulary slides that help provide direct instruction around tiered vocabulary so that students, whether they needed that differentiated instruction or whether it's a student that maybe is ELL, or is still learning those concepts, has that common vocabulary around math. And then in social emotional learning, adjustments to morning meetings, supplemental curriculum options, Be Good People is one supplemental instructional material that we use, and then those intentional relationship building based off of student need. If you have questions on these slides, Lucas is going to be the best one to answer for you. But again, on this slide, just examples of what we do to provide differentiated instruction in the secondary. I can talk about Newsela. That's a platform that we use that helps kids extend their thinking or have access to other content and other curriculums, and then they'll read different passages and they have the ability to check comprehension and work on some of those reading literature and reading for informational standards, as well as SIOP strategies. So SIOP would be the Sheltered Instruction Observation Protocol, typically and most commonly known to support our ELL students, but those are also just really good teaching strategies to ensure, again, that we're explicit with vocabulary, different instructional routines for engagement, and ways that students can process aloud. SEL, again, adjustments to their weekly advisory lessons. Our secondary students are engaged in advisory 4 days a week. And so in that time during, sometimes it's called homeroom or advisory, they're working on those individual lessons and instruction around SEL. So tier 2, interventions and extensions. So that's kind of everything in the green. When we're thinking about tier 2, that was that next piece of the triangle that typically supports about 15 to 20% of students that core is not meeting all of their needs. So that tier 2 intervention builds on the foundation of tier 1 and provides additional targeted support to a smaller group of students who need more and able to succeed. So I italicized the word additional because, again, everybody is still receiving that core support, and these are things that we're doing on top of, not in place of, but we're supplementing material to ensure that kids maybe need additional background or there's some skills, some foundational skills that they're missing so that we can provide those scaffolds and those supports so they have a higher chance of accessing core material. If we go back to those universal screeners, that is a lot of times how we are determining if an intervention is needed for a student, or on those common formative assessments, when we're noticing that students are struggling to capture that, then we would automatically put them into an intervention and try to intervene as soon as we possibly can. A student is in an intervention usually between 4 to 16 weeks. You might be asking why that's such a range. A couple years ago, legislation came into place around reading plans and then math plans. And so a student is required to be in an intervention from one universal screening period to the next universal screening period. However, just because they're in an intervention for every 4 to 16 weeks doesn't mean that we don't change it. So we are constantly monitoring student progress, either weekly or biweekly, depending on the assessment, and we are making changes and monitoring them, adjusting them based on student need. And so that's kind of that last bullet of how often are students is student progress monitored. Sometimes it's daily, especially with a student that maybe has a behavior plan that they're focusing on and they're working, and we would call it check in, check out. We are monitoring that daily and looking at that data to determine if a student needs to continue, or if a student is ready to fade out, or if we need to enhance or bolster their intervention. Now, I could get lost in this for days, so I'm just going to give you a very brief overview. These next two slides talk about something that we refer to all the time, and we call it in, on, and out criteria. And that is essentially, what's the criteria for academics, attendance, behavior, and SEL screening that would say, if a student is struggling, this is what we're going to use, and we're going to get them in an intervention as soon as we possibly can. Our on criteria would say, this based off of this metric, this would say our students are making progress. They are on target with this intervention. And the out criteria is, what does the student need to be able to demonstrate or do to say that they no longer need this intervention and they're out of that intervention. So we are really explicit in all of our academics, attendance, behavior, and SEL screening of defining how is a student going to be determined if they need an intervention. Let's look at that data, and if they're making progress, we're continuing. If they're not, we're adjusting and we're monitoring, and as soon as they're ready, showing that they don't need that anymore, we are fading them out and assessing to see if they need something different or moving on to a new target or a skill. Or sometimes it is moving to a less intense intervention, or with students that may have a behavior intervention that they're working on, it is maybe fading out a piece of an intervention and having them do things that are less tailored or less intrusive. And then, so that is, we do that for elementary and secondary. So interventions in Tier 2 in elementary and reading, we have an intervention inventory for reading and math that we have spent so much time working on. And so in the past, probably prior to the last, Carmen, would you say 3 years or so, interventions have been a little bit of a wild, wild west. And if it felt right, people were doing the interventions, and you know, they had data, and I guarantee, I know that they were doing what they thought was best and trying different things. But we put together a team with our curriculum coordinators, some instructional coaches and teachers, that it is an evaluative committee that comes together and vets instructional materials. We want to make sure, the last thing that we want to do is make school harder for kids. And one thing that we were noticing is when it was like, we've got this intervention and everyone was doing their best of what they saw, and we know that students see multiple service providers in a day, the kid was like, wait, I'm doing this over here and I'm doing this over here, and it's not aligning. And so what we wanted to do is make sure that our inventory, our intervention inventory, aligns with our core instructional materials. It aligns to our philosophy around engaging students and using best practice and making sure that all of the intervention materials and curriculum materials we're using are high quality and research-based. And so we've spent a significant amount of time and have a whole vetting process, and a process that teachers, if they think that they've got an intervention they want to review, there's a process to bring it to the committee reviews it, and we update that frequently. We do have a scheduled intervention time that all students that need an intervention are in that daily. It ranges between 20 and 30 minutes. It is about 150 minutes a week, but then it just kind of varies what Thursday early outs to. And then some students might receive Title I or academic support. And then in our social emotional learning in elementary, check in, check out with modified features. Check in, check out would be something that probably is one of our most commonly used interventions, whereas it is very easy, again, with our in criteria that teams establish, and a student will have just a document that they take with them that helps them get feedback after every period throughout the day, where the intervention is really ensuring that the adult is providing them feedback on how they're doing all throughout the day. Instead of it just like, had a great day, it's after math. I really like the way that you did this. This is one thing we're gonna work on for next time, but you showed effort, and so this way you got a 2. And then they tally their points up with a mentor at the end of the day, and we are looking for 80% students to be doing their expectations 80% of the time. We also have social and emotional skills groups that is typically taught with a counselor or maybe a student family advocate, and then check and connect, which is just providing an additional mentor, an adult in the building that they may not normally have a connection with, is providing them another adult in the building that they can connect and build a relationship with. Exactly like elementary has the in on out criteria, this slide demonstrates the same thing for secondary and what our secondary buildings are doing to determine when a student needs an intervention, when they're having success, and when they may be ready to fade. So our tier 2 interventions in secondary, one of the most common, I think, and probably go-to for academics is that advisory intervention. And it's a way for students can request to work with a teacher if they're struggling on a concept, or vice versa. A teacher can request to work with a student to work on a skill or work on finalizing something or providing additional instruction in an area that has been determined that they need additional support. We talked about our student support team a little bit a couple weeks ago as we were reviewing what our district support team is, but if we go back to, gosh, Lucas, it was a meeting that we had in Colby Miller, principal at North Central. It was back at the old boardroom, had talked a lot about what our student support teams do. And then we have them in all of our elementary, middle, and high schools that are really just taking that convergence of data and looking at how students are doing in multi-disciplines or in more than one specific curricular area so that they can provide more comprehensive support if a student is struggling in more than one academic area. We have math coaches at several of our middle schools that help with the implementation of math curriculum and understanding the math standards and the scope and sequence of that. And then our personalized reading and math plans for 6th graders. So you might be kind of curious about what that is. What I had just talked about, the intervention for K through 5 legislation, it is a K through 6 legislative piece. And so our 6th graders follow that same process in terms of the screener, the intervention, the plan, and then screening again at those different benchmark periods and being progress monitored. One thing that we've started the last few years is a co-taught math and ELA. We started with math and then grew into ELA, and we've seen a lot of success with our co-taught classes. Some of them are co-taught with ELL as well as special ed, and we've seen a lot of success to provide those interventions right in the moment. We call it just-in-time learning, that our teachers are able to scaffold and provide additional support in those classes. Same supports that we provide for social emotional learning, we provide in middle school and high school as well. Extensions, so if we go to PLC question 4, what are we doing if a student's already demonstrating proficiency? And so this is something that we've worked really hard as a district. It used to just look like, oh, well, they go to ELP, which is our talented and gifted program. But we've worked really hard to ensure that we're building the capacity with the teachers to understand what extensions can be provided already within their instructional material. And we know that there are a lot of students that already demonstrate proficiency that are not in ELP. And so we have worked processes in elementary to allow for increased collaboration with our ELP teachers who are providing consultation and support to the teachers in terms of, okay, this is a standard. These are students that I think are already mastering. How might I extend this lesson? And providing direct support to teachers so that they can scaffold and extend the learning in their classroom. Same thing that helps students that may be struggling in reading, those that are demonstrating proficiency or reading a text at a really high level. Small group reading is a great opportunity that we're able to intervene and extend there as well with harder level texts, things that may be more activities or projects that may be more that may lend to more extension of where we want kids moving into the application phase. And then one thing that is new for us in elementary is the adoption of our proficiency scales. And so a student is proficient, and then once they're proficient, there is a column after that is advanced. I could go on for this for days, but I won't bore you, but we would get into what we call Webb's depth of knowledge, and it's where we get into the depth of knowledge 4, which is where kids are really starting to apply. They might be teaching other people. They're in that phase where they take their knowledge that they have and they transition it to another content area. They transition it to maybe a project that is engaging their brains in their work in a different way. In math, same sort of thing. We have math centers, exploration problems, and then we have new this year, ICCSD created unit extensions. And that's something that our teachers, instructional coaches, and curriculum team worked on last year to be ready for this year around our new illustrative math that are creating these unit extensions so that once a student demonstrates and we have evidence that they know how to do that concept, that they're now engaged in these unit extensions. And then for social emotional learning, we have a lot of great leadership opportunities and peer mentoring. Extensions in secondary, I think that these sometimes are a little bit more known and more visible just with our course guide, but we have extended learning program for students in middle school and high school. But then this is where we have a lot of honors and advanced placement courses. One thing that was new 2 years ago was condensed 6-7, or was that just last year, Lucas? Holy smokes, just last year was when we started in condensed 6-7. So that is a math class where it is all of 6th grade and half of 7th grade in one school year. And then they would track to that next grade, which would be taking the other half of 7th grade and all of 8th grade in a quick pace to be able to take Algebra 1 in 8th grade. And then we just have that accelerated math path. Dual enrollment with University or Kirkwood are different things that we're able to offer for our high school students in terms of academic enrichment as well as IJAG. We have something that we're really excited about is High School Heroes is a program with collaboration with JA that allows for our high school students to be volunteering and working with other groups. A lot of times they work with us and do different projects in the district to help just continue to work on their leadership opportunities or Silver Cord hours are things that they can work on as well. All right, made it through the yellow part of the triangle. So now to the tippy top would be our Tier 3 intervention, which would be about 5 to 10% of students that they have the core, they've had Tier 2 interventions, and now we need something that is more individualized. That would be when it is a Tier 3 intervention. It is the most intensive level of support. It's reserved for students that have ongoing complex or the needs are unresponsive to the other things that we've done. And so we have systems in place to support about 5% of our students in Tier 3 as well, that I think sometimes is misinterpreted as that's where special ed falls. Sometimes it falls there, and we also have Tier 3 plans for students that do not have a disability in an academic or a behavior area. And so again, an intervention for Tier 3 is determined by the school-based team. It's highly focused, and it's delivered in small group or individual settings. We will say that it is not impossible, but it is very, very rare that a student would receive a Tier 2 intervention without having, a Tier 3 intervention without having a Tier 2 intervention first. We would always want to intervene in a quick and kind of a systematic way before we make things really individualized. Students, again, are progress monitored on a regular basis so that we can determine that if they're in that on criteria or if we need to make changes. So in the elementary, interventions around Tier 3 are collaborative team conversations in reading, our student support team planning to individualize student needs. It might be more time in their intervention, their skill. They may go see a Title I teacher that might provide that additional instruction, but it's a lot of that Tier 2, but it's just more individualized. And so it might also be a smaller group. Instead of 6 people in a setting, it might just be 1 or 2. And we are probably changing instruction at a more frequent basis. Sometimes students that have an IEP, individualized decisions are made for those interventions. And so that can be considered a Tier 3 intervention. For social emotional, one thing that is unique to Tier 3 is that's when we would engage in conducting a functional behavior assessment, or what you may be familiar with as an FBA, in order to create a behavior intervention plan, or a BIP, something that we talk a lot about. Is in order to create that behavior intervention plan, we need to have a true solid understanding of what the behavior is and why students are doing the things that they're doing, so that we can create that Tier 3 plan that is individualized for them. To be honest, it is not a ton different in secondary. It just the materials that they use might be different. So again, collaborating with teachers, that small group targeted instruction. But in high school, they do have a couple other programs with Thinking Mathematically, or STARS, which is that strategic thinking and reading skills. Again, same thing for social emotional learning. We would engage in that functional behavior assessment to determine what their behavior intervention plan might look like. And at that point, it is very individualized based off of what that student needs and the goal that we have set for them in order to show success. So Tier 3 extensions in elementary are typically when a student would be then in that extended learning program or enrichment groups. And so that would be for reading and math, and social emotional learning, just those same sort of things around that those leadership opportunities and peer mentoring. We wanted to just share a little bit more explicitly about how students are identified for our extended learning program. They enter through a screening pool. So we are assessing every single student starting in 2nd grade to see who may need additional support outside of what core or outside of what the Tier 2 enrichment might provide for them. And so all of our 2nd through 5th grade students are screened, and they show who has high potential on the district's universal screeners, and then they have an opportunity to take an ability assessment in the spring of the school year. It used to be called a COGAT, which is a cognitive ability test. We now use an assessment called the Nagliari that helps us determine if students have skills that demonstrate they need something outside of the core or Tier 2 enrichment. And then our service models, ELP services, they're small group or individual student pull-out. Typically it's small group, but students meet with their ELP teacher outside of the regular classroom and participate in differentiated activities that are supported by the ELP teacher. That then are still related to our core standards, but then are really taking the pieces of proficiency and beyond in that application. Very similar to elementary, again, have ELP, but then we have just specific things like our twice accelerated programs. So they're taking additional high school or college courses when they're in middle or high school, advanced placement, dual enrollment, concurrent enrollment. There are a lot more opportunities to kind of take a different track once you're in secondary. And we do have students that are accessing those programs in our buildings. And then social emotional learning as well, that same things that we do for Tier 2 with the Silver Cord and the high school heroes. So how are students identified for ELP in the secondary? It's either through their elementary identification, and so they've been identified as needing that additional support, and so they will continue with that. And middle school and high school students can go through a self-nominated process to be accepted into the program. In elementary, it is a parent nomination process, or just through those screeners. In secondary, we do allow the students to advocate for themselves and say, yes, I think I need this additional learning, and then they can be considered for that as well. And it's an independent study, research-based, with the ELP teacher as the facilitator for that model. I could talk about this for days, but I'm going to offer you the opportunity to ask any questions. I also want to give a quick introduction of Allison Freitag. I am going to get her title wrong because I'm just going to plainly call her, she is our SEL guru. And so she helps provide a ton of support, professional learning, direct support to our counselors and our internal and external PBIS, positive behaviors, interventions, and support. So she is here to answer any questions that you may have around SEL or our universal or tier 2, tier 3 supports around social emotional learning. Any questions that you have for us?
Directors, go for it.
I'm going to jump in just because I have a specific memory from the little bit of time I spent in the classroom at Liberty a few years ago, where we had a student who would drop in for part of our class and then leave. And there were certain lessons that we were doing that we had available to us some differentiated materials that he could work on while the students were doing something else. And other times there was not, or we were making it up on the fly. And so can you talk a little bit about differentiated materials? And this is specifically in, there's a lot of subjects in a high school that kids are trying to go to. So there's a lot of differences there. Like, what's available and how does it come into play? Or
yeah, that's a great question. I think that Director Abraham looks like she wants to take a stab at it.
I just know of one really great tool. There's an AI tool that special ed teachers can easily access. I assume others can too. And you put material in and it will give you differentiated written material. Just boom.
So that is something that we are learning more about. And actually, was very highly attended on our November 4th professional learning about how you can use AI. I will also say one thing that we're trying to do is increase our amount of time and ability to be able to collaborate with other educators. So maybe collaborating with special education that could help with the scaffolding. One thing that we utilize a lot in elementary is a process called back mapping, where we're going and looking at what those prerequisite skills are that a student would need in order to access that. In elementary, in our curriculum that we use, there's almost always, if it's not there, we would never select the material. There are always suggestions and ideas on how to differentiate. So it'll be like maybe below level access, on level, and above level, that we're able to have access to materials that would help just naturally scaffold that based off of that standard or that skill that you're trying to do. So collaboration is huge. So I know that there are some pieces that our secondary has done. If you want to talk a little bit about what you've done with schedules to allow for more collaboration.
Yeah, I was going to mention the same thing. It could be provided with the curriculum resources or the collaboration time between special education and gen ed teachers, whether it be through their common prep or involvement within the collaborative team process or in the co-taught classroom as well. And the same can be said with our ELL teachers as well.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments from directors?
Sure. Thank you for that presentation. That was just, I don't think I have any questions, actually. There was so much information. A couple of questions for Allison, so I'm glad that she is here. So do we have a screener then for our K through 2, or do we just start that process at grade 3?
I think this will work, yes. That is a great question. On the previously used tool where we used My Sabers, there was a Sabers option. The same is true with our new Panorama screener, which we've used. I think we've now had 8 administrations with our secondary students. So 7 through 12 students have taken that 8 different times. So we've got really some great trend data. With the K2 screening tool, it is teacher perception of student need rather than student voice. What we value about the Panorama survey and any universal screener on the SEBH side is hearing directly from students. You heard Eliza talk about how we dropped the second grade because we did have the students themselves identifying their particular skills and experiences, and the vocabulary was pretty tough, and so the data was really unreliable. Because it's a teacher, the Panorama survey at the K2 level is teacher perception. We feel like we already have that through what we call it is a teacher request for assistance, and maybe wasn't really discussed as part of this, but another piece of that student support team meeting that each of our schools throughout the district have is an opportunity for teachers to say, it's typically in a form, I have concerns about this particular student in the area of academic behavior, attendance, et cetera, SEL. For these reasons, these are the different strategies that I've used in my classroom. I would like to have this student discussed as part of that SST for potential intervention. And so we feel like going to a K2 screener, which again is that teacher perception, it would just be duplicating a system that we already have in place. Does that help answer?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Is there parental input involved in that process as well then?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes, there's legislative direction that we have to make all questions that are on the survey public facing. We have them linked on our district website. Through the online registration process annually, parents determine or guardians determine if their child can participate.
And do we have a lot of parents that opt out, or is it
Very
just a
small number,
Okay.
actually. Typically, it's right around 2% to 5% at the very highest. Most of the time when students are unable to participate, it isn't actually their parent or guardian saying no, it's typically a lack of response. So it's just that the field wasn't selected, and so we default that to no, of course, to make sure that we're not having any student survey that doesn't have consent.
Got it. And so a lot of these skills, these are, some people call them soft skills, but really what they are is essential skills. They predict success in so many areas of our life. And so just as with the academic skills, where we take another temperature check, at other points in the year, are we taking additional temperature checks with the SEL screeners as well to see how students are growing in those areas?
Absolutely, that's a great question. We do survey twice a year, October, and then historically with our secondary, we have used the screener in February. February is not really a great time for that, so this year we did bump it back, and we will use when we return from spring break through about mid-April as our second window of the year. So it's kind of a opportunity for students to get into their routines in the fall. October is a great time to see what has your experience so far been like. All of our teams right now, we just worked with our elementary leaders last week to dig into that survey data because it's the first time that they have had access to using this tool. The data that we get back is incredible. We can disaggregate, we can break that down in so many different ways, and the teams are just hungry to see what is that student feedback and how can we improve. So many schools will actually have additional more informal checks. They'll have conversations in their morning meeting. They'll provide, our real goal is to enhance our universal instruction for everybody, right? And then obviously from that, then we see which students need additional skill instruction and additional support. The teams love digging into the data, and it's so fun. Like a celebration is our supportive relationships data comes back every we have trend data over multiple administrations now. Our supportive relationships are in the high 80s or 90s% across our district schools, and that's incredible. Those two questions are, do I have a staff member that I can go to? Do I have a peer that I can go to in a time of need? And we have celebrations every screening administration in that area and many other areas. I think our biggest growth area this fall screen was in challenging feelings and student response to that.
Thank you so much. I was really curious about if that was guiding classroom wide or more individual targeted, but you answered that. Thank you.
Yeah, and the collaborative teams are starting to dig into the data as well, which is exciting because it's moving beyond just our building leadership team to how can I, as a classroom teacher, impact change and enhance my instruction in that area.
Thank you.
I think the other thing I would add, Director Finch, in that is that our K-2 students do have our social emotional learning standards, and so they are assessed, for lack of a better term, 3 times a year and reported to parents of how they're doing engaging with peers, those social emotion behavior regulation, emotion regulation, and so those are conversations that we're continuously engaging with families on, as well as having those weekly classroom counseling sessions with our school counselors where they are going in and having conversations around those behaviors, and then again that process for teachers or actually any staff member that through observation, through a conversation has concerns about students is able to refer them and get some support at any level that they may need.
And just for clarification, that's K-5.
Yeah, she was just asking about K-2. So that is a different thing for K-2, but we do have that for K-5, yeah.
Thank you for the presentation. There was a lot to digest in there. My first question is, when it comes to when students are done with whatever they're working on and they're going on the computer, how are we ensuring that the students are going and doing the extensions on the computer? Because sometimes I've heard in the past, and it was not as much this past school year as the one before, of, oh, I just get on and start going on the internet.
Yeah, I would say that that's not typically people's go-to. Sometimes they'll have them, if they're finished, go on their Chromebook. They may be working on projects, but one thing that we just started this year, I believe Adam or Josh had presented on it before, was around Securely Classroom. And so that is a monitoring tool that all teachers have the ability to monitor in any given moment what a student is currently on, has the ability to assign them to certain things that they can only go on certain things. And so if it's, I want these kids, the only thing they have access to is Lexia, they can do that. Or if they're wandering and getting to something they're not supposed to be on, they can close that tab and have a conversation around what they should be doing. But in elementary, they really are engaging in those educational, Lexia is typically what they go to around literacy, happy numbers sometimes, extra math, or Khan Academy are different things that they're going into. But they do have the ability to send out things that they can get into and to block or close tabs.
Thank you. And this is more on the side of extensions, and part of this because I came across a study this past week that talked specifically on high-achieving low-income students, and just it was a study over the state of Ohio and how these students slowly fall off where they should be at compared to their high-income peers, the low-income high achievers. And one of the areas that they spent some time talking on is some of these screening assessments. Do we have any sort of cut points where we say, oh, this student is so high that we let them move on? I think even more so at the middle school where we start doing math, the advanced math coursework. Do we have those kind of assessments, or how do we really determine these things?
I want to make sure I understand your question of what cut scores we would use to determine if a student needs to be accelerated?
Yeah.
Yeah, we certainly do. Yep. And so we would use, again, a convergence of data to determine if a student needs access to a higher level course. However, we did change our process this year to allow family recommendation, that if a family felt like their child needed to be challenged in math, they could enroll in Math 6-7 instead of us being a gatekeeper for what they had access to. However, we do have a nomination process of who, based off of what we're seeing in class and where they are performing, because we want to ensure students that parents maybe don't have the ability or the knowledge to request for acceleration, that we are doing that to ensure that those kids are being accelerated and challenged.
So it's no sort of numerical, like we only allow 125 students in or anything like that? Okay. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
So Eliza, your comment brings up a question, I guess. How are we doing with making sure that students are participating fully in this marvelous system if they're not, if they're English language learners and they're still working on they're working on English and their parents may not be English speakers at all?
And when you say how they're working in the system, are you meaning accessing the different tiers of support?
Yeah. How are they doing in relationship to kids who are native English speakers?
Yeah. So I'd say a lot of that is through collaboration and continued learning that we have done with our teachers with things like SIOP, which is research-based instructional practice for students that are acquiring the English language. But we've worked really hard to improve our collaboration through the collaborative team and the PLC process with our ELL teachers and our general ed classroom teachers in terms of ensuring that the curriculum and the supports that we are providing in ELL are actually giving our kids the ability to have access to the core. And so one thing that you're probably going to hear us talk about the latter half of this year and next year is a real focus on vocabulary instruction. We know that that is one of the most high leverage strategies that we can give for all kids, specifically our students that are learning English and specifically our students that our FRL is an area that research has shown that when students have access to high quality targeted vocabulary instruction, that's where we're going to get the biggest bang for our buck. So that's a piece that Lucas, Carmen and I are really digging into, is how we can bring that high quality professional learning on vocabulary instruction. But again, that collaboration interventions, just because you're ELL student doesn't mean that you're not going to have access to the same intervention system or extension system that any other student in the class would have.
Oh, excellent. Thanks very much.
You're welcome.
Just to comment on your last statement about vocabulary instruction, I can say I have heard some fantastic things happening in at least one of our buildings, just because I live with a teacher. And
you're going to be talking about Brentwood?
Yep. Yes. And how all the teachers are doing that vocabulary instruction and the difference that it's making. So that's great to hear. But just one question, and it was related to the 2-tier interventions for elementary school kids. And for like reading and math, they have scheduled intervention time. I'm assuming it's not occurring during core lessons in the classrooms, but when are they getting pulled out to do those scheduled interventions?
I'm glad you said that, because they're not always pulled out.
Okay.
Most of the time, the classroom teacher is the one that's providing that intervention.
Great.
But in our instructional minutes, they have their core literacy time, and intervention is a completely separate block of time. But what a majority of our buildings do to maximize our resources is it's all hands on deck approach. And so it would be like, we've done really great work as principal group to ensure that all 3rd grade has intervention at the same time, so that now I've got an option for all 3 classroom teachers for whatever group it is. A lot of times it's called walk to reading or walk to math, but kids will be going into the intervention group that meets students. We have an intervention block for literacy and an intervention block for math that's built in daily.
Great. Well, thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
That was a very thorough presentation. We appreciate it. Thank you. Next up, that takes us to our certified annual report.
All right, so Adam is going to be brief on these next two because we gave you kind of the good stuff at the beginning in the first presentation. with enrollment and budget impacts. So we have two other things to deliver here tonight, but he'll probably give you a cursory overview and take questions.
Yeah, so I'm going to spend very little time on this. Actually, I want to open that. I included all of the screenshot exports from the annual report. This is the CAR that we submit every September. This was submitted on time without issue. And all of the exported data is available there and for the public to peruse. I'm happy to address any questions about it. We did have one question, which was about the $24.5 million line for fiscal services and business services under purchase services. We didn't actually spend $24.5 million on purchase business services, but what that is that's our health and dental insurance for employees. So all of that falls under that category. So of the 24.5 million, 24.3 million, roughly a little more than that actually, is health and dental insurance. So that's what that big line item is. Like I said, I'm not going to go into a ton of detail there. I am going to provide a bit of context about the action item I have coming up so that you can just take action on that. And we do have an SBRC appearance this year. We didn't expect to. 2 years ago, we had a negative unspent balance. This year, or last year, we had an initial negative unspent balance before they approved our English language excess costs. This year, we're positive even before the English language excess costs. So the reason for our appearance is that amount of what we are positive before EL excess costs is less than our total categorical fund balances. So homeschool assistance program, preschool program, et cetera. This didn't used to trigger an SBRC appearance. Now it does. It's not a violation of any rule. But what they're really trying to do is avoid districts with massive carryovers and categoricals. We don't have that. We are pretty judicious about what we carry over. The one that's bigger than normal is preschool, and that's because of our expansion into full-day preschool. So that's explained in those SBRC attachments. Those have already been sent to the SBRC, and then we'll send them the board-approved versions as well once we have that approval from you. But they already have those. They've expressed no questions or comments or anything to us. So happy to address any questions that you have.
Are there any questions or comments from directors? All right, thank you so much. That takes us to our last presentation of tonight, which is the Foundation Annual Report.
Everybody, do you need to stand up before I start? Feel free to stretch while I talk. Okay, I'm going to, wait, is it a mouse situation? No. There it is, I was hiding. All right, I got it. Okay, everybody, so I'm Laura Ebbinger, Director of the Foundation. We'll just jump right into it. I'm so glad to be with you tonight. This is always a chance for me to reflect on all the great things we get to do in this district. So this is the team. Our staff were lean. It's just myself, Abby Reuter, our business director, and Jill Braun, who does our programs. This is our current board that you're looking at right here, and then several of you also serve in two roles as our liaisons. So Superintendent Degner and President Malone and Brady all join us every other month too for our foundation board meetings. Our mission remains the same. We're connecting the community with our schools to ensure every student has extraordinary learning experiences. I always think the key word in what the foundation does is that, and why it's caps locked and bold, is every student. I think it's pretty common for you to want what's best for your own kid when you come into the public school system. What's unique about the foundation is that 43 years ago, a group of parents and educators said, you know what, it's not just what's best for my kid at my school, it's every kid in this district. So all 20 elementaries, all 3 middles, all 4 high schools are really kind of have this safety net of the foundation, making sure that every kid gets it. I'm doing my part by having an elementary, a middle school, and a high schooler this year and next, so that's my family. Stats here, just to throw in some fun numbers for you, just show us that everything's going well financially at the foundation. I think probably the thing I like most on this slide is that our smallest gift this year was $1. Our biggest gift was $183,942. Each one of those really enables us to do this work. Our monthly supporters, a lot of you are in this room too. Our staff Payroll donations really help us kind of have that consistent support, so we know what to plan for years to come. It's really, it's a lot of people who make this work possible. What we do, I kind of describe as these are our main 4 categories, and I'll just break those down a little bit for you here. Between the grants and scholarships and endowments, this is something for a little bit of our history, we had kind of stopped doing our Excellence Fund grants while we shored up some other programs. Our foundation has grown, the support has grown, so I'm really glad that this is back and kind of stronger than ever. Our Big Idea Hunt grants and our Little Idea Hunt grants. If you if you ever want to sit on a grant review committee, it's a great way to see what's going on in the district and how, we have grants for $65 and grants for $25,000. But what we're responding to are our educators saying, hey, this is what we can do in this building. This is how we tap into the talent here, or kind of an innovative idea that we think would work well. Even just hearing tonight, like with that universal language and core communication tools, some of those we've had small grants at schools to say, we want the same language on our playgrounds and index cards that teachers can bring with them, but maybe it doesn't necessarily fit right now in our district budget or building budget, and so being able to say yes to that and then pilot it at one school, say, yeah, it's working great, and actually we figured out a cheaper way to print it, so bring that to the next school. So those are just some of the things we funded this year. Scholarships and awards, not every district gets something like this, but we have 123 scholarships and awards that we gave out this year. That totals $255,000. That's only going to ICCSD students. That's not, this isn't a national scholarship program. It's staying right here, and we're really proud to do that work. Jill does the majority of it. Signature programs. This is kind of, the art, we sometimes call them targeted programs. I think signature sounds better, so I'm going with that. But it's the things we've been doing often for years and years that we've taken over we do all the funding for. We arrange transportation and make sure they happen. So Any Given Child is short for the longest title ever, Kennedy Center, Ensuring the Arts for Any Given Child. This is our designation as one of 26 cities in the country as a Kennedy Center site. That means that we've kind of gone through this elaborate process with a lot of our arts organization partners to ensure that every K-8 student has a comprehensive fine arts education. The font is tiny, so if you're able to read it, these are just all the programs we've got going this year. Some of them run all year long. Others are one incredible orchestrated event with the buses and the transportation team, like when we all pull up to Hampshire for live arts with our 8th grade. But if you also look at the program sponsors, they're the ones who really make sure this happens. Every time we bring out a grade level, it's $5,000 just on transportation alone. So being able to have these community partners say that this is something they value, our kids getting to have these experiences is really key. Oge Mora was our featured visiting author here for elementary. We've been doing this since 1988. Hills Bank is a partner in that. We also do a secondary visiting author. Samira Ahmed was here with us in the spring. This is if you needed a feel-good moment today. Weber left their Art and Literacy Day after having tied into all of the curriculum team's work around Oge Mora's books, where we learned about community. And they were second graders left and said, how can we be part of this community and do something great? And they created their own food drive. And that's, that's just the kind of stuff that happens when you're, when all this work comes together. So visiting author we love, School of the Wild you probably know and love. Most kids' favorite day, 5 days of their elementary year, or elementary years. So that really ends up being about an $80,000 project each year, and it's so worth it. We love it. If you're and fielding questions about it. It's going to continue. Location still TBD. SFA funding. So we organize our school supply drive. We do a mid-year supply restock, some additional winter distribution. And then we have our SFA funding or SFA emergency funds for families. That was something I was really grateful that our board stepped that up in light of the SNAP benefit pause here, where each family, so families can be referred by the student family advocates for emergency assistance funding. Usually we cap that at $200 per family. In light of the SNAP shutdown, we increased that to $400 per family. Oftentimes that's, I signed the checks, right? So it's keeping utilities on, it's, maybe paying for a car repair so that a student can get to school, but it's the flexibility, and our SFAs do incredible work, so it just gives us another way to support families. Our Staff Connections being another one of our programs, Silver Salute, look at all those happy faces, Shine Awards, and Ed Rising support for our students who want to come back and join us as teachers one day. Everything we do happens because of you. So these are our main events that we really rely on to make our work possible. So Run for the Schools, Teacher Tuesday, Dine Out for Education, EEB, or Education's Everybody's Business Breakfast, and then the campaigns we run. Also, our end of year appeal, it's a letter, you'll all get one in the mail, but oftentimes that's a really big key to just the flexibility to be able to meet the needs in the district the following year. So I would love to answer any questions that you might have. Also, it's a great night for Aurora Borealis tonight if you look north, so if you want to get out of here and see that, I understand too.
Were there any questions or comments?
I'll be the person that makes comment.
Okay.
Because I've seen Aurora Borealis before a few times. So now I had the chance to visit the Ogie Mora. That I said that correct, right?
Yeah, Ogie.
Ogie Mora. And I will put a plug in that it wasn't just the elementary students that got something out of it.
Yeah.
There were a group of, I want to say, 6 to 8 high school students that were helping their art teachers out at the event. And she took a good 20 to 30 minutes just talking to those high school students and pulling them aside. And, what stood out to me is that there was a great piece of advice in there, which was more or less being the best of what you are the best at. Because she talked about, growing up in these art classes and not being the best art student. But she found her own style of art, and that was what she stuck with and is really propelled her career. But just going through those students and telling them, don't get down on yourself, because someday being the best what you are the best at will work out for you. But now I just wanted to put that plug in because it was just, it was fun watching those students that had spent their day and just getting to play around with, well, for me at least, getting to play around doing the quilting work and the extra activities for the kids. So needless to say, thank you for what you do, and thank you to all of the donors and the people on the board of the foundation for their help with you.
Thank you. And thank you to April, who's still here tonight, who was the one corralling all the high school art students and making sure that that was a fantastic experience in the weaving room.
I think thank you for the presentation, Laura. I think what's really wonderful to see about this is how promoting arts education and, and adding to the curriculum with what the foundation does is how it creates community. That's something that we all want to be a part of, right? I'm wondering, because I still hear from people that they had never heard about the foundation before. People in the community, even some educators, still are not familiar with the foundation. And so what can we do to help raise awareness and promote it? Because as we, this community that it creates is so important.
Yeah. I really think, you know, when we look at such a lean team, that's part of it, is that by keeping our operational costs low, we also don't have a big publicity budget or a full-time marketing person. I certainly rely on Kristen and her team probably way more than she would like for helping us get the message out about the foundation. But yeah, always, if you can help us amplify the great work that's being done here between the foundation and the district. I know this partnership is rare because I'm on a message board with a bunch of other executive directors of foundations. We're like, wait, how do you get this off the ground? Or, you know, and are really quite envious of the great working relationship we have between our two orgs. So if you can just help us amplify when we're having events, thanking the sponsors who continue to donate to all the schools instead of, you know, just particularly one, you know, one school or another, that would be great. We have our superintendent circle event coming up in December. That's a time for us to thank some of our most loyal donors. So I would encourage you to attend that if you're able. But yeah, just talk us up. We love some good press.
Should be easy to do.
Any other questions?
Thank you so much
right.
for the presentation, and thank you for highlighting that School of the Well will continue. I have had questions about that.
Yes.
So thank you so much. That takes us to our action items for tonight. And first up, we have the 300 series policies administration. Is there a motion to approve?
I move to approve the 300 series policies.
Second.
Any discussion? All right. Board Secretary Colvin, ready to vote?
Online voting is open.
I got it. Refresh.
Did yours show up?
Yeah. If you refresh.
Director Finch, how would you like to vote?
Yay. I'm a yay vote, Kim. Thanks.
All votes have been cast and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
Thank you. I have learned that if you refresh, it will pop up. So next item is policy 200.3R1, responsibilities of the Board of Directors. Is there a motion?
Move to approve the policy 200.3R1, responsibilities of the Board of Directors.
Second.
Is there any discussion? Hearing none, Board Secretary Colvin, ready to vote?
Online voting is open.
Kim, I'm a yay vote.
Thank you, Director Finch. Director Lingo, how would you like to vote?
I'll be a yay vote, but it appears whatever's wrong with Jane's computer, it is passed on to mine.
All right.
All votes have been cast and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
Thank you. Next up is policy primers. Is there a motion?
I move we approve the policy primers.
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, Board Secretary Colvin, ready to vote?
Online voting is open. All votes have been cast and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
Thank you. Next up is the animal policies. Is there a motion?
Move to approve the animal policies.
Second.
Any discussion? Board Secretary Colvin, ready to vote?
Online voting is open. All votes have been cast and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
Thank you. Next up is motion to cast our ballots for the vote for director for District 1 and a director for District 2. So there's only one person running for each for the AEA Board of Directors. So if there's no concerns with casting a vote for each one of those, I would take a motion as one motion to vote for the directors nominated.
President Malone, I would be happy to move that.
Second.
All right. Board Secretary ready to vote.
Online voting is open. All votes have been cast and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
All right, next up is our indoor multi-use practice facility schematic design. And there will be a presentation, I think.
Yeah, so, yes, we'll have a few slides on this presentation for you. It's kind of weird with the number of action items we had tonight, but this would be a typical approval for you that would sit in Appendix 9, but because it's one of those important steps, the schematic design, we wanted to make sure you had a chance to get the overview on it. So
cool.
Kurt's up here handing out some fun stuff to look at.
Kurt Dwayne never gave us mock-ups, ever.
Just want that noted.
So, noted. Got it.
We get little toys.
Zoom in out. Yeah, so what you've got, you'll see details of, but those are models that the architect team put together, so you can kind of see what the general look and feel of the buildings will be on the exterior.
Okay, I'm sorry, what is this? This piece?
So you'll learn that here in a little bit. That's the support space. So won't belabor the goals for FMP 2.3. You'll probably see this slide at the beginning of all of my presentations as we bring these projects forward. Just want to keep that at everybody's forefront, that that's what we're ultimately judging these projects on, right? Are we meeting the goals that we had for FMP 2.3? Design process was very brief. It was 2 months basically from start to finish in terms of having a kickoff meeting and ending up at schematic design that we're presenting tonight. If you remember, as we worked on these field houses, having 3 different comprehensive high schools and having one similar amenity to each one, what I always referred to as, well, we got to figure out what the base model is, right? So this is what the base model landed on. So it's 60 yards of indoor artificial turf, 4 running lanes, and then the support space would be a lobby and an entry, restroom, and then storage facilities for any athletic, marching band, whatever equipment you have. So the large piece of the building obviously is the big turf component, and then the support space is what is different on each of those models. It kind of rotates based on where it needs to be on the site. So again, that's the base model that all of them are essentially capturing. So we'll start at City High. This is a schematic axonometric view. So to place the building on the site, this would be the backside of the building. This little part right here would be the newest addition to the building, which is the Commons Gym and all that stuff. You can see the Bates press box down here. So this sits on top of the existing softball field, and it is built into the hill. And so the bathrooms and stuff could be used on game day if need be. It's close enough proximity for that. So this is just an exterior view of what it could look like, or what the estimates show it looks like. So that's what's called a polycarbonate translucent panel, and that can grow or shift as we keep moving forward with budgeting. You see there'll be a little hawk out there facing First Avenue. Indoor rendering, again, this just shows the running lane and the turf surface, and then the windows that can look out onto the site. Liberty High was a little bit more challenging in terms of trying to find a place on the site. Where we landed was kind of directly north of the Commons. So when you look out from the Commons, you will see this building off in the way. So again, exterior view. The baseball field would just be to the left off of the image. Then the houses behind the campus would be what you're seeing beyond there. And again, just an interior rendering showing marching band utilizing it. West High School, this is on the existing baseball field. So this white block that's up here that you can also see on the model as you guys passed around, that's the existing West High School. And so the auditorium is right here, band rooms, new gym addition over this way. So the nice thing about West is we'll be able to provide a road back around to it with some additional parking back there. Again, just an exterior view. This is looking up from the soccer field, and then interior rendering. I know Principal Gross was really interested in recruiting some of those players, so. Cost estimates. So our architect team sent this off to a construction management firm just to provide the cost estimates. We're not going that route necessarily in terms of delivering the projects, but that gives us a high level of confidence because that's professionals who are in the industry every day providing us with estimates of what they think the projects will cost. So for West and Liberty, our estimate was in the $9.7 million construction costs. The total budget for all these is 12 million at West Side, 12 million at Liberty High, and then 13.5 million at City High. City High had more because of some site constraints and some other requirements that we need to meet there because of that campus. So you can see for City and West, we're slightly over budget, but I would say this is early enough and the bidding market obviously changes. And so I'm comfortable enough with those where they're at moving forward and continuing pressing on. As we get better numbers, the more details we get defined. To be that close this early, I have no concerns in terms of moving forward. Liberty High School, the overages because of the site we had to pick for that. There's some fill that's going to need to happen there. But that project is actually 2 years out, and these numbers are inflated to help reflect that. And so I think as we kind of keep working on that one, we can get that one more in line, and we certainly have contingency available within the whole scheme of FMP to help cover things exactly like that. Then the schedule, just what the schedule is for all the campuses overall. So City and West will be coming up this fall in terms of beginning design, bidding in the summer, and then construction starting in the fall. Like I said, Liberty's about 2 years further out from that. What questions, comments do you have?
Just a couple quick ones. What is the HVAC situation? Heated, heat and air?
Yeah, so we had that debate through design, and initially we were planning on heating only, but the architects came back and said, actually, from a code perspective and a cost perspective, we might as well go ahead and air condition it, which was surprising to us.
Yeah.
So
Fabulous, because I had heard no air, which
that was our original intent, was to no air. That way we could get a bigger facility without cooling it, but they've come back and said it's actually kind of cost neutral to air condition it with the heating system that has to be in place.
awesome. I'm sure the students will really appreciate that. And then the track, the 4 lanes, is it 2 on each side, but then they don't connect at either end?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep. So it's more like just be a 40-yard straightaway. So more work on sprinting than anything. Distance runners can obviously run laps around the turf, and that wouldn't be the worst thing in the world by any means from a surface standpoint.
Thanks, Kurt.
Thank you for the presentation. First, the computer-generated picture of the soccer players appeared to be my son and some of his teammates from a few years ago, so I got a good laugh about that. I have a question about the restrooms. I don't see a gender-neutral restroom.
We had not included one, but we are not so far down the line that we could not.
Okay. All right.
We have to have single stall restrooms to do that, just a terminology thing, but we could look for a single stall one, Director Finch, for sure. So good point.
Okay, thank you.
Since this, I know this was already reported to the directors, but how much does it cost to operate these buildings?
Yeah, so we some of that depends on the final HVAC system selection. A lot of our campuses were kind of tapped out in terms of tapping into geothermal, and so these buildings will probably be a little bit more conventional in terms of the selection. But I would estimate probably anywhere 75,000 to 175, 200,000, somewhere in there, just from a straight utilities cost to run.
For all 3, is that correct?
That's per.
Yeah. Per. Okay.
Per.
So 100 to 175,000 per building.
Per building.
Just out of curiosity, can you go back to the images of these?
Yep. Which one do you want?
Oh, specifically City and Liberty, because I know the way that they'll sit on both those campuses. These areas, like on the back and at the top, Will that be backlit all night long, or will that be?
No, that'll likely be on a timer.
Okay,
Yep,
just thinking of.
yep.
light
Neighbors,
pollution
be a
and
good neighbor.
neighbors, Yeah.
Yep.
Thank you. I don't think there's any other comments or questions. All right, so that takes us to if there's a motion to approve.
I'd move approval of the schematic design.
Second.
Is there any further discussion or questions? Hearing none, Board Secretary Coven ready to vote.
Online voting is open. Director Finch, I didn't get yours.
It said it, all of us voted yes.
Well, it blinked on and then it went
Oh.
away. I got you.
Okay.
All votes have been cast and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
All righty, thank you. Next up is a motion for the application for at-risk dropout prevention plan.
I move we approve the at-risk dropout prevention plan as presented in the agenda.
Second.
I'm sorry, did you want to make a comment? Oh, okay. Is there any further discussion?
Walked right into it. Yeah, quit smiling so big.
Is there any discussion? Hearing none, Board Secretary Coven ready to vote?
Online voting is open.
They look like it. That's what he gets.
Slate, no discussion.
All votes have been cast and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
Thank you. And lastly, for action items, the SBRC approval of exhibits. Is there a motion?
I move approval of the SBRC exhibits.
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, Board Secretary Coven ready to vote?
Online voting is open. All votes have been cast and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
Thank you. And that takes us to the Director Liaison Reports. Are there any highlights that directors would like to share?
I was able to, I got an emergency phone call from a friend that runs or helps administer a Boy Scout troop to be the elected official that came and spoke to the group, and which I did. I brought my two youngest right out of the bathtub and brought him over there. He played with them, and I talked to the students and I was telling them the role of the school board. And when I was talking to them, I go, you know, the school board, we just have one person that we're the boss of, just one person. And I go, do any of you know who the name of that guy is? And one kid raises his hand, Matt. And I'm like, do you know his last name? He's like, no, I just know his name is Matt because my dad calls his voicemail every day. We cancel school for snow, and he leaves a message. So that was the highlight of my liaison report. I got a good laugh out of it, and I've been trying to visit a lot of the schools, and it's been really nice to get out there and see the actual buildings and what's been going on. So, thank you.
Thank you. Any other highlights from directors? That takes us to agenda setting. There will be a work session on the 18th. Is that right? Yes. Okay. Where we will discuss mental health resources.
We'll start that one at 4:30. I think
4:30.
as listed there. So usual time of ed committee, but we'll do the work session at 4:30. And we'll do it here, yes.
And I will not be present for that because I'll be headed, because I'm the delegate at BoardCon. Then that takes us to our December 9th meetings where we have a operations committee meeting where climate action will be discussed, and that starts at 5 o'clock. And we go into our regular meeting that will start at 6 o'clock, and that meeting will be maybe short if I can navigate over Oh, just board members, we will get information on the new platform that we will not be using Diligent. We'll be switching over to Assembly, so a lot easier to navigate. But we will have our standing items, hearing from student reps and ICEA, couple items under consent agenda, but we will be retiring the board with the canvas of votes and saying farewell to Director Eyestone again.
Say it like that.
I'm just saying. And then immediately following the adjournment of that, we will welcome our new board member to the table, Director-elect Horn Frazier, and we will move through our normal organization processes, board members taking the oath, electing leadership, and our annual approvals, and just a couple items of business. Will we have those presentations that's listed? The annual audit, Iowa School Performance Profile Update.
No, we need to do some edits on
Okay.
there yet, President Malone. Most of the annual financial health report, quarterly financial report are probably the most likely. I'll work with Adam on those. We'd kind of displaced two of those financial reports from this meeting because of the length of tonight's meeting. The Iowa School Performance Profiles you've already received. I would just say thank you for sitting through those last two presentations, Universal Core Interventions Extensions. That was my doing, and part of that was intentional because I think it's it's a little bit personal to all of us when the state releases these performance profiles and wants to name and shame us. And I think what that did, hopefully tonight, is give you a good idea of the job of an educator today. It is so different. It's so vastly different. The job is so extensive and expansive. And so I hope our teachers are listening and got a fair shake tonight on what their job looks like every single day for our kids. And so we won't have that one because that was all leading up to that, but we've already done the release of that. So that one will be removed. I would say we're due back to you about cell phones.
Yep.
We're likely to talk about that. And then also a conversation about before and after school programs we'd like to agenda as well.
That would be great. And as a reminder, Director, for parking lot items, feel free to share those with Superintendent Degner or myself or Molly if there's some before December 9th.
President Malone, I would like to have a brief discussion about adding to the agenda on the December 9th meeting or some other meeting soon after that, a consideration of the resolution approving Fourth Amendment protections in these cities in the county, and encouraging private employers to do the same. As we all know, we have been urged to do that at the joint entities meeting that we participated in a few weeks ago, and there was a substantial demonstration at a Iowa City Council meeting for this same purposes. And we've of course received, by my count, over 150 email messages from people in the school district or the county that urge us to do the same thing.
And
I know, I'm sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
I've had conversations with Superintendent Degner, and I think, Matt, it's okay to say that Superintendent Degner is also working to arrange a meeting with people from Escúzame Voice on this same matter. So I'm not sure what will be the result of that collaboration, but it's something that if there's board support for continuing to potentially consider this request, I hope we would put it on an appropriate agenda.
Okay. And I know Superintendent Degner, like you said, was scheduling meetings.
Yeah, I'm communicating back and forth with them right now. We're looking at something as quick as maybe Friday, as late as Monday or Tuesday. But I wonder if a good next step would be to see what's a likely scenario after that meeting or an outcome of that conversation. And so that's what I might suggest for consideration.
Does that work?
Yes, that would be fine, yeah.
All right. With that, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
So moved.
Thank you. Is there a second? Meeting is adjourned. Oh, all in favor, sorry. All right, good night.